I found out my new boss was the same cold billionaire who insulted me on a plane, and then I discovered he'd just bought the community I was fighting to protect. If you've ever felt trapped between survival and selling out, between hatred and something far more dangerous, stay with me. This story gets darker before it gets better, and the truth hiding behind Adrian Cole's ruthless empire will make you question everything you think you know about power, sacrifice, and love. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Hit that like button and let's begin. The cabin lights had been dimmed for hours. Lena Brooks pressed her forehead against the cold airplane window, watching New York's distant glow emerge through the darkness below. Her reflection stared back at her. Exhausted brown eyes, hair pulled into a messy bun, the kind of tired that sleep couldn't fix. She'd spent the last 3 days in Chicago, pitching a community park redesign to investors who'd barely looked up from their phones. Another failure. Another waste of time. Her laptop sat open on the tray table, battery at 4%, displaying the design she'd been obsessing over for months. Oakland Park, a small patch of green wedged between crumbling apartment buildings in Brooklyn, where kids still played basketball on cracked concrete and old women grew tomatoes in plastic containers. The kind of place that wouldn't survive another year if someone with money decided it was worth more dead than alive. She'd drawn it 100 different ways. Playgrounds, community gardens, covered pavilions where families could gather without spending money they didn't have. Every version was beautiful. Every version was financially impossible. The man beside her shifted in his seat. Lena had noticed him when she'd boarded. Impossible not to. First class wasn't crowded at 3 a.m, and he occupied his space like someone who'd bought the whole row just by existing. Expensive suit, no tie, dark hair starting to gray at the temples. Mid-30s, maybe. The kind of handsome that came with money and zero interest in being friendly. He'd been working since takeoff. Laptop, tablet, phone, a rotation of screens filled with numbers and contracts and things that probably decided whether companies lived or died. He hadn't said a word, hadn't even glanced in her direction. Lena preferred it that way. She returned to her own screen, adjusting the shading on the park's proposed gazebo structure. Her firm, Wallace and Associates, though Associates was generous for a staff of 4, couldn't afford projects like this. Marcus Wallace, her boss, had been clear about that last week. Lena, I love your passion. I do. But passion doesn't pay rent. We need commercial clients, real revenue, not feel-good projects that'll bankrupt us. He wasn't wrong. The firm was drowning. 3 months behind on office rent, 2 employees already gone. Marcus talking about shutting down entirely if things didn't turn around. And here she was, still sketching parks for communities that couldn't pay for them. Stupid. Financially useless, stupid. You're wasting your time. The voice came from beside her. Low, matter-of-fact, completely uninvited. Lena's head snapped toward the man. He wasn't looking at her. His eyes remained fixed on his own screen, fingers still moving across the keyboard. But he'd definitely spoken. Excuse me? Lena kept her voice level. Your design. He gestured vaguely toward her laptop without breaking his typing rhythm. Community park in a low-income area. No commercial anchor, no revenue model, no path to sustainability. You're wasting your time. Heat flooded Lena's face. I'm sorry, were you reading over my shoulder? Didn't have to. You've been staring at the same rendering for 40 minutes, adjusting details that won't matter. Now he did look at her, and his eyes were gray, cold gray. The kind that made you feel evaluated and dismissed in the same glance. Let me guess, passion project? Something to feel good about while your actual firm circles the drain? Lena slammed her laptop shut. You don't know anything about my firm. I know you're working at 30,000 feet on a flight that costs more than your monthly salary. I know your laptop is 6 years old and held together with optimism. I know that design represents everything you wish you could build and nothing you actually can. He returned to his own work. I know you're angry because I'm right. You're not right. You're an asshole. That got his attention. He actually stopped typing. Community spaces have value beyond profit margins, Lena continued, her voice harder now. That park serves 2,000 families who don't have backyards or money for summer camps or anywhere safe for their kids to just be kids. But I guess that doesn't show up on your spreadsheets, does it? Value and viability are different things. His tone remained infuriatingly calm. Your park is beautiful, genuinely. But beautiful doesn't survive contact with reality. In 3 years, that land will be worth triple what it is now. Someone will buy it, someone will develop it, and your gazebo will be a luxury apartment amenity for people who don't need it. Not if we fight. You'll lose. You don't know that. I do. He closed his own laptop with a quiet click. Because fighting requires resources you don't have. Time, money, legal teams, political connections. You have heart. Heart loses to capital every single time. Lena wanted to scream, or throw something, or maybe both. Instead, she forced herself to breathe, to think, to not give this smug stranger the satisfaction of seeing her break. Let me guess, she said quietly. You're one of them. A developer. Someone who sees communities as numbers. Someone who'd buy that park just to prove you could. Something flickered across his face. Too quick to read. I'm someone who understands how the world actually works, he said, and wastes less time pretending otherwise. Must be lonely up there on your moral high ground built from other people's suffering. Wouldn't know. I don't waste time on morality either. The flight attendant appeared before Lena could respond, offering drinks neither of them wanted. The interruption broke whatever dangerous momentum had been building. When the attendant left, the man returned to his work without another word. Lena turned back toward the window, her whole body vibrating with fury. She didn't open her laptop again. Didn't trust herself not to say something that would get her thrown off the plane. Instead, she stared at the darkness outside and tried to calm the racing of her heart. Hours passed. The cabin grew colder. Lena wrapped her arms around herself, regretting the thin cardigan that was all she'd brought. The temperature had dropped enough that she could see her breath. She asked the flight attendant for a blanket, but they'd run out. Something about a catering issue at the departure airport. Fine. She'd survived worse than being cold. She pulled her cardigan tighter and closed her eyes, willing herself toward sleep that wouldn't come. Beside her, the stranger continued working with mechanical efficiency, apparently immune to both cold and human discomfort. Eventually, exhaustion won. Lena drifted into uneasy sleep, her head tilted awkwardly against the seat, still shivering. She didn't see the man pause his work. Didn't see him glance toward her, something unreadable crossing his face. Didn't see him stand, retrieve his own coat from the overhead bin, expensive charcoal gray, still warm from being folded, and drape it carefully across her shoulders. Didn't see him return to his seat and resume typing as if nothing had happened. When Lena woke 2 hours later, disoriented and still half frozen, the coat was there. Heavy, warm, smelling faintly of cedar and something expensive she couldn't name. She looked at the man beside her. He didn't acknowledge her, didn't look up, just kept working with the same cold efficiency he'd shown all night. Lena pulled the coat tighter around herself, confusion mixing with the anger that hadn't quite faded. She wanted to throw it back at him, wanted to tell him she didn't need his charity or his pity or whatever this was. But she was so cold, and the coat was so warm. She kept it. On Nates. The plane landed at JFK just after dawn. New York spread out beneath them, gray buildings, gray sky, the kind of early morning that felt like the city hadn't quite woken up yet. Lena gathered her things quickly, shoving her laptop into her worn messenger bag, trying to ignore how the stranger's coat had kept her warm through the descent. She should give it back, obviously, common courtesy. But when she turned to him, he was already standing, pulling a different jacket from his carry-on. Clearly, he traveled with options. He still hadn't looked at her, hadn't acknowledged the coat situation at all. Thank you, Lena said, holding the coat out. For this. He took it without meeting her eyes. You were shivering. It was practical. Right. Practical. Don't read into things that aren't there. He moved past her toward the exit, and Lena felt the familiar anger spike again. This man was impossible. Cruel one moment, kind the next, and somehow making both feel equally cold. She followed the other passengers out, through the terminal, past baggage claim. The stranger had disappeared into the crowd ahead, probably into some luxury car service, off to ruin someone else's day with his capital versus community speeches. Good riddance. Lena caught the subway back to Brooklyn, squeezed between a man arguing on his phone and a woman whose shopping bags kept hitting her legs. The train rattled through the dark tunnels, and she tried not to think about the man on the plane, tried not to wonder why someone so convinced the world ran on cold math had bothered keeping a stranger warm. Didn't matter. She'd never see him again. She reached the office just after 9. Wallace and Associates occupied the third floor of a building that had seen better decades, wedged between a laundromat and a bodega that sold the best coffee in the neighborhood. The elevator was broken again, so Lena climbed the stairs, using the time to rehearse what she'd tell Marcus about Chicago. The investors weren't interested, too risky, too community-focused, too everything that made the project worth doing in the first place. Same story, different city. But when she pushed through the office door, something was wrong. The space was too quiet. Their receptionist, Amy, wasn't at her desk. The lights were on, but the usual morning chaos, phones ringing, Marcus shouting about deadlines, coffee brewing, was absent. "Hello?" Lena dropped her bag by her desk. "Anyone here?" Marcus emerged from his private office, and Lena's stomach dropped. His face was gray. Actually gray. He looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. "Lena, good. You're here." His voice sounded hollow. "We need to talk." "What happened?" "Conference room. Everyone's waiting." Everyone turned out to be just Amy and David Chen, their junior architect. 4 people total. That was the whole firm. Marcus closed the door behind them, and the click felt final. "I'm going to be direct," he said, not sitting. "The firm has been acquired." Lena blinked. "What?" "Last night. The deal closed while you were in the air. We're no longer independent. Wallace and Associates is now a subsidiary of Cole Enterprises." The name meant nothing to Lena. Who the hell is Cole Enterprises? Real estate development, one of the biggest in the country. They've been buying up small firms for months, architectural, construction, property management, building a vertical integration empire. Marcus looked like he might be sick. "They made an offer I couldn't refuse. Literally. We were 3 weeks from bankruptcy." Amy was crying quietly. David stared at the table. "What does this mean for us?" Lena heard herself ask. "It means we work for them now. New management, new projects, new everything. They're sending someone this morning to brief us on transition protocols." Marcus finally sat down, heavily. "I'm sorry. I know this isn't what any of us wanted, but it was this or shut down completely." The room fell silent. Lena felt numb. Just yesterday she'd been fighting to save a community park. Now she couldn't even save her own job independence. "When do we meet this new management?" David asked quietly. Marcus checked his phone. "Should be here any—" The conference room door opened, and Lena's entire world tilted sideways. The man from the plane stood in the doorway. Same expensive suit, same cold gray eyes, same expression of absolute control. But now he wasn't a stranger arguing about community parks at 30,000 feet. Now he was standing in her office. Their eyes met. Something flickered across his face. Recognition, calculation, maybe the faintest hint of surprise. But it vanished so quickly, Lena almost thought she'd imagined it. "Good morning," he said, his voice filling the small room with quiet authority. "I'm Adrian Cole. As of last night, I own this firm." Marcus stood quickly. "Mr. Cole, we weren't expecting you personally. You thought I'd send a subordinate." Adrian moved into the room with the confidence of someone who'd bought 100 companies and would buy 100 more. "I prefer to handle new acquisitions directly, fewer miscommunications." His gaze swept across the faces at the table, Amy, David, Marcus, before landing back on Lena. He didn't acknowledge their argument, didn't mention the flight. His expression remained professionally neutral. But Lena knew, and he knew she knew. "I'll keep this brief," Adrian continued. "Wallace and Associates is now part of a larger restructuring initiative. Your current projects will be evaluated for strategic fit. Some will continue. Some will be absorbed into Cole Enterprises' existing pipeline. Some will be terminated." "Terminated?" Marcus sounded panicked. "Mr. Cole, we have contractual obligations, which my legal team has reviewed. You'll be compensated for cancellations according to standard industry practices." Adrian pulled a tablet from his briefcase, scrolling through something. "Most of you will maintain your current positions under new management structure. A few roles will be made redundant." Amy's crying got louder. "However," Adrian's voice sharpened slightly, "there is one project I'm particularly interested in repurposing. A community development initiative in Brooklyn, Oakland Park area." Lena's blood went cold. "That's my project," she heard herself say. Adrian looked at her directly for the first time since entering the room. His expression revealed nothing. Is it? Yes. I've been designing a community park renovation for... I'm familiar with it. I reviewed your files last night. He tapped something on his tablet. Interesting work. Completely financially inviable, as I'm sure you're aware, but the location is valuable. Valuable for what? Cole Enterprises has been planning a commercial development in that area for 8 months. High-end retail, luxury apartments, integrated office space. Your park sits exactly where our main plaza is scheduled to go. The room felt like it was shrinking. You're going to destroy it, Lena said quietly. I'm going to build something that generates revenue and jobs. Your gazebos and community gardens will be replaced with economic infrastructure that actually serves the neighborhood. That park serves the neighborhood. Sentimentally, not economically. Adrian's voice remained calm, factual. I understand you're emotionally invested, but this is a business decision, not a philosophical debate. Lena stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. You can't do this. I literally can. I own this firm. I own your designs. I own the contracts you signed when you started working here. He glanced at Marcus. I assume she signed the standard IP agreements? Marcus nodded miserably. Then legally, Miss Brooks, your community park belongs to me now, along with everything else. The words hit like a physical blow. Lena thought about the families who used that park, the kids who played there, the old woman who tended the tomato plants and shared the harvest with neighbors who couldn't afford fresh vegetables, the teenagers who gathered there because it was the only place in 6 blocks where they could exist without spending money or being told to leave. All of it. Gone. Replaced by luxury retail and expensive apartments for people who didn't need them. You knew, Lena said, her voice shaking. On the plane. You saw my design. You knew you were going to do this. I knew the project was financially impractical. I didn't know your firm would be part of my acquisition until after we landed. Adrian closed his tablet. The timing is coincidental. Coincidental. Yes. You're going to buy up struggling firms, steal their projects, and destroy communities for profit, and you're calling it coincidental. Something hardened in Adrian's expression. I'm going to build a $40 million mixed-use development that will employ 300 people and generate significant tax revenue for the city. Your park was a beautiful dream that would have died in 6 months when your firm went bankrupt and the land got sold to whoever bid highest. I'm not the villain here, Miss Brooks. I'm just the one honest enough to admit how this ends. You're destroying people's lives. I'm creating economic opportunity. For who? Not for the families who actually live there. For everyone who gets a job, for every business that leases retail space, for the city that collects property taxes to fund services. Adrian's voice didn't rise, but it cut deeper because of it. You want to help poor communities? Give them employment and infrastructure, not gazebos and gardens that make you feel good about your own compassion. Lena wanted to hit him, wanted to scream, wanted to do anything that would crack that cold exterior and make him feel something. But she knew better. This man didn't feel things. He calculated them. I quit, Lena said. Marcus made a strangled sound. Lena, I'm not working for someone who thinks destroying communities is good business. She grabbed her bag from where she'd dropped it earlier. Find someone else to help you profit off suffering. She was halfway to the door when Adrian spoke. If you leave, the park dies immediately. Lena stopped. Without you, I have no reason to preserve any of it. Adrian continued, his voice maddeningly calm. I'll fast-track demolition and start construction within a month. But if you stay, if you work on this project, you might be able to negotiate some preservation elements. A small green space, a playground, something. Lena turned back slowly. You're blackmailing me. I'm offering you a choice. Walk away with your principles intact and watch the park die completely. Or compromise. Stay involved and potentially save pieces of what matters to you. He met her eyes directly. What's worth more, Miss Brooks? Your pride or their playground? The room was completely silent. Lena looked at Marcus, who wouldn't meet her eyes. At Amy, still crying. At David, who looked resigned to whatever came next. She thought about the families, the kids, the tomato plants. She thought about the man on the plane draping his coat over her shoulders while she slept. Practical, he'd called it. Not kind, just practical. This was the same thing. Not mercy, just calculation. Keeping her close because she was useful, because she knew the community, because she'd design a better exploitation than some stranger who'd never set foot in Brooklyn. Fine, Lena said finally. I'll stay. Excellent. Adrian made a note on his tablet. You'll report directly to me on this project. First planning meeting is tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Don't be late. He left without another word, and the silence he left behind felt suffocating. Marcus exhaled slowly. Lena, I'm so sorry. If there had been any other way, don't. Lena couldn't look at him. Just don't. She walked out of the conference room, past her desk, down the 3 flights of stairs, because she couldn't stand being trapped in a small space right now. Outside, Brooklyn morning traffic roared past. Delivery trucks, taxis, a man selling coffee from a cart on the corner. Normal. Everything looked completely normal. But nothing was. Lena pulled out her phone with shaking hands and called Rachel, her best friend since college. Hey, you're back. How was Chicago? Rachel, Lena's voice cracked. I need you to tell me I didn't just make the worst decision of my life. What happened? And Lena told her everything. The plane, the argument, the acquisition, Adrian Cole standing in her office like he owned the world because legally he did. Rachel listened in silence until Lena finished. Okay, she said finally. Okay, first breathe. Second, this man sounds like a complete nightmare. He is. But third, and I'm saying this as someone who loves you, he's not wrong about the park. Rachel, listen to me. You've been killing yourself over that project for months. Your firm was dying. The park was going to get developed eventually no matter what you did. At least this way you're still in the room. You can still fight for something. From the inside of the machine designed to destroy it. From the only position where you might actually make a difference. Rachel's voice softened. Lena, you're the most stubborn person I know. If anyone can turn this nightmare into something worth fighting for, it's you. But you have to actually fight, not just quit and pretend that's heroic. Lena closed her eyes, leaning against the brick wall of her office building. I hate that you're making sense. I know, I hate it too. Rachel paused. This Adrian guy, he really gave you his coat on the plane? Yeah. And then bought your company and crushed your dream 12 hours later. Yeah. That's deeply messed up. I know. You're going to make him regret this, right? For the first time since the conference room, Lena felt something other than despair. Anger. Cold, focused, useful anger. Yeah, she said quietly. I really am. The rest of the day passed in a blur of administrative chaos. Paperwork to sign. New employment contracts to review. IT protocols from Cole Enterprises that required changing every password and downloading new security software. Amy cried through most of it. David kept his head down. Marcus looked like a man attending his own funeral. Lena worked in silence, reading every word of the contracts, looking for anything she could use later. But Adrian's legal team was thorough. No loopholes, no escape clauses, just clean, efficient corporate acquisition language that turned Wallace and Associates into a wholly owned subsidiary of Cole Enterprises. She went home after dark, took the subway to her tiny apartment in Crown Heights, and sat on her bed staring at the wall. Her phone buzzed. A calendar notification. Tomorrow, 8 a.m. Planning meeting with Adrian Cole. Lena set an alarm for 6, giving herself enough time to prepare. Not for the meeting. For war. If Adrian Cole thought buying her company meant controlling her, he was about to learn exactly how wrong he was. She'd work on his project. She'd stay in the room. But she wouldn't make it easy. She'd fight for every inch of that park. She'd document every decision. She'd find proof that his luxury development was corrupt, illegal, or unethical. She'd expose him. And when she had enough evidence, she'd burn his whole empire down. Lena fell asleep that night with a plan forming in her mind. Dangerous, probably stupid, but better than surrender. She'd become Adrian Cole's worst nightmare. From the inside. Lena arrived at Cole Enterprises headquarters at 7:30 the next morning, giving herself a buffer she didn't need. The building occupied an entire block in Midtown, glass and steel rising 40 stories. The kind of architecture that screamed money without bothering to whisper. She'd looked it up last night. Adrian Cole had designed it himself 15 years ago, back when he was still getting his hands dirty with actual architecture instead of just acquiring people who did. The lobby made her feel small, which was probably the point. Polished marble, ceiling 3 stories high, a reception desk that looked like it cost more than her annual salary, security guards in suits that fit too well to be off the rack. Everything designed to remind you that you didn't belong here unless someone very powerful said you did. Lena gave her name to the receptionist, a woman with perfect posture and a smile that never reached her eyes. 38th floor. Someone will meet you at the elevator. The ride up felt too fast. Lena watched the floor numbers climb, trying to steady her breathing. She'd barely slept, had spent most of the night researching Adrian Cole, trying to find something, anything, that would give her leverage. What she'd found was terrifying in its efficiency. Adrian Cole, 32 years old, built his first real estate empire by 25, lost his wife in a car accident 4 years ago, became a single father to a daughter named Sophie. After that, something changed. He stopped doing small projects, stopped caring about architecture as art, started acquiring, consolidating, building an empire that now controlled billions in assets across 12 states. The business press called him brilliant, ruthless, a visionary who understood that the future of real estate wasn't building properties. It was owning the entire supply chain. The architecture blogs called him a sellout who'd abandoned his craft for profit. The few personal profiles Lena could find painted him as cold, isolated, impossible to know. No friends mentioned, no relationships. Just work and a daughter he never discussed publicly. A man who'd turned himself into a machine after tragedy broke him. The elevator doors opened. A young woman in a charcoal dress waited in the corridor, tablet in hand. "Miss Brooks? I'm Jennifer, Mr. Cole's executive assistant. Follow me, please." They walked through corridors lined with architectural renderings, past projects, current developments, proposals that probably cost more to frame than Lena made in a year. Jennifer moved with the brisk efficiency of someone who'd learned not to waste her boss's time or her own. "Mr. Cole is running a few minutes behind schedule," Jennifer said without slowing. "There's coffee in the conference room. He'll join you shortly." She opened a door and gestured Lena inside. The conference room had windows overlooking Manhattan, the kind of view that made the city look manageable, like something you could hold in your hand and reshape however you wanted. A long table, 12 chairs, coffee service, set up on a side table with cups that probably cost $50 each. Lena poured herself coffee she didn't want, just to have something to do with her hands. The door opened behind her. "You're early," Adrian's voice, already familiar in a way that made her uncomfortable. "Nervous or strategic?" Lena turned. He looked exactly like he had yesterday. Expensive suit, no tie, the same controlled expression that gave nothing away. But his eyes were tired. Slight shadows underneath, the kind you got from too many nights working instead of sleeping. "Thorough," Lena said. "I read my new employment contract twice." "Find any loopholes?" "No." "Good. My lawyers are expensive for a reason." He moved to the head of the table, setting down his own tablet. "Sit. We have a lot to cover." Lena took a chair halfway down the table, putting distance between them. Adrian noticed but said nothing. He pulled up something on his tablet, then projected it onto the screen on the wall. Architectural renderings appeared, a massive development spanning several blocks. Glass towers, retail spaces, carefully landscaped plazas. Beautiful, in a cold corporate way. "Brooklyn Commons," Adrian said. $40 million mixed-use development. 200 residential units, 60,000 square feet of retail, 20,000 square feet of office space. Construction starts in 6 months if we stay on schedule. Lena stared at the rendering. Where Oakland Park should have been, there was now a luxury shopping plaza with designer storefronts and outdoor dining areas for people who could afford $20 salads. "Where's the community space?" she asked. "You're looking at it. The plaza is public accessible. The retail mix includes a grocery store, pharmacy, coffee shops. That's not public space, that's a mall. It's economic infrastructure that serves the neighborhood better than an empty park." "Oakland Park isn't empty. 2,000 families use it. 2,000 families will have access to fresh groceries and jobs." Adrian pulled up another screen. Financial projections, employment numbers, tax revenue estimates. 300 permanent jobs during operation, Another 500 temporary positions during construction. 15 million in annual tax revenue. What does your park generate? Community, safety, places for kids who can't afford, sentiment. We've established this. Adrian's voice stayed level, almost bored. I didn't bring you here to re-argue philosophy. I brought you here to work. Your choice is still the same. Help shape this development to minimize community impact, or walk away and let someone who doesn't care at all handle it. Lena forced herself to breathe through her anger. What exactly do you want me to do? Integration architecture, making luxury development coexist with existing neighborhoods without destroying what's already there. He pulled up another screen. Demographic data, community surveys, maps of existing infrastructure. You know this area. You understand what matters to the people who live there. I need you to design transition spaces that don't feel like walls between old Brooklyn and new Brooklyn. So I'm supposed to make your gentrification look friendly. You're supposed to make inevitable change less destructive. Adrian finally looked directly at her. Development is coming to that neighborhood whether I build it or someone else does. Would you prefer working with someone who at least acknowledges the community exists? I'd prefer working with someone who asks the community what they want instead of deciding for them. We did. 8 months of community board meetings, environmental reviews, public comment periods, all required by law, all on record. He pulled up meeting minutes, hundreds of pages of documentation. 93% of feedback was positive. People want jobs and services more than they want an empty park. Lena scanned the documents, looking for the trap. These are real? Every word, public record. You can verify them yourself. She didn't know what to do with that. Had prepared for lies, for manipulation, for evidence of corruption she could use against him, not for actual community approval. Then why do you need me? She asked quietly. Because community boards approve projects for political reasons. Community members approve them because they're desperate for anything that might help. Neither group is thinking about what happens 5 years from now when rents triple and the people who wanted jobs can't afford to live near them anymore. Adrian pulled up another rendering, residential towers. I need someone who actually cares about long-term community survival to make sure this development doesn't accidentally destroy the neighborhood it's supposed to serve. You're worried about accidentally destroying it. I'm worried about unintended consequences. They're expensive to fix later. There it was again, that cold practicality that somehow ended up sounding almost kind. Lena hated how much it confused her. What's my budget? She asked. For integration architecture? $3 million. Lena nearly choked on her coffee. $3 million? Is that insufficient? No, that's more than enough. She pulled out her own laptop, opening a blank design file. I'll need access to all community survey data, traffic patterns, income distribution, school locations, medical facilities, everything that determines how people actually live there. Jennifer will get you database access this afternoon. Adrian made a note. What else? Site visits. I need to walk every block of the development area. Talk to people. Not in official meetings, just talk. Fine. Take whoever you need from your old firm. I work better alone. Then work alone. He pulled up a calendar. I want preliminary concepts in 2 weeks. Full integration proposal in 6. We present to the community board in 8 weeks. Questions? Lena had about 1,000 questions, none of which were about architecture. Why are you doing this? Why do you care about unintended consequences if profit is all that matters? Why did you give me your code on the plane? Why does someone who claims not to waste time on morality spend $3 million on community integration? But she asked the only question that was safe. Do I report to you directly, or is there a project manager? Directly to me. Every decision goes through my approval. That seems inefficient. It's necessary. This project has political complications you're not aware of yet. I need to control the narrative. He stood, signaling the meeting was over. Jennifer will set up your office today. You'll have access to all Cole Enterprises resources. Use them. He was halfway to the door when Lena spoke again. Why didn't you tell me on the plane that you were planning this development? Adrian stopped but didn't turn around. Would it have changed anything? I would have understood why you were so sure my park would die. You would have accused me of personally destroying it, which you did anyway 12 hours later. Now he did look back. Timing didn't matter. The outcome was always the same. You could have told me you'd done community outreach, that people wanted this. You wouldn't have believed me. You'd already decided I was the villain. His expression remained neutral, but something in his voice sharpened. You still think I am. The only difference is now you're working for me anyway. He left before Lena could respond. She sat alone in the conference room, staring at the renderings still displayed on the screen. Brooklyn Commons, a $40 million machine designed to generate profit while claiming to serve community needs, and she was now part of building it. Jennifer appeared in the doorway. Miss Brooks, I'll show you to your office. The office was on the 37th floor, smaller than Adrian's, but still absurdly nice. Windows overlooking the city, a desk that looked hand-built, computer equipment that was probably worth more than everything Lena owned. A bookshelf already stocked with architecture references and building codes. Mr. Cole had these brought up from your old office this morning, Jennifer said, gesturing to a box of Lena's personal items on the desk. Your plant, design books, the photo frame. He thought you'd want familiar things. Lena stared at the box, her sad little succulent that barely survived her neglect. The framed photo of her and Rachel at graduation, the stack of design books she'd collected over years of haunting used bookstores. Adrian Cole had personally thought about making her office feel less foreign, the same man who'd told her morality was a waste of time. Thank you, Lena managed. Jennifer smiled, a real smile this time, not the corporate version. He's not as terrible as he seems. Mr. Cole, he just doesn't know how to be anything other than efficient. That's generous. Maybe, but I've worked for him for 3 years. I've seen things he doesn't think anyone notices. Jennifer handed Lena a building access card. Database access will be ready in an hour. If you need anything, extension 411. Welcome to Cole Enterprises. She left Lena alone in an office that was nicer than anywhere she'd ever worked, surrounded by resources she'd never had access to before, working for a man she'd promised herself she'd destroy. Lena unpacked the box slowly, put her plant on the windowsill where it would get light, set up the photo frame, arranged her design books on the shelf. Then she pulled out her laptop and got to work. Not on integration architecture, on finding proof that Adrian Cole was exactly the villain she needed him to be. The database access came through an hour later, just like Jennifer promised. Lena spent the rest of the day deep in files, community surveys, environmental impact reports, financial projections, contractor bids. Everything was meticulously documented, legal, transparent. It made her furious. She wanted to find corruption, bribes, shady deals with politicians, evidence that community approval had been manufactured, something that would justify the anger burning in her chest. Instead, she found exactly what Adrian had shown her: real community input, real approval, real need for jobs and services in a neighborhood that had been neglected for decades. Lena left the office after dark, her head pounding from screen time and cognitive dissonance, took the subway home in silence, surrounded by tired people heading back to their own complicated lives. Rachel called as Lena was unlocking her apartment door. How was day one working for the enemy? Confusing, Lena admitted. He's not what I expected. Meaning? Meaning he's exactly as cold and calculating as I thought, but the calculations don't add up the way they should. Lena dropped onto her couch. He's spending $3 million on community integration architecture. $3 million. For a $40 million project, that's a huge percentage to waste on something that doesn't increase profit. Maybe he's not wasting it. Maybe it's PR. That's what I thought. But Rachel, I've been reading through 8 months of documentation, community meetings, surveys, impact studies. All of it real. All of it showing he actually listened to what people said they needed. So he's a benevolent dictator instead of a regular one. Still a dictator. I know. Lena rubbed her eyes. I wanted clear lines, good and evil, easy moral certainty. Instead, I got complicated economics and genuine community approval for something I'm supposed to hate. Do you hate it? Lena thought about the renderings, the jobs, the services. The fact that Oakland Park was objectively underutilized and the neighborhood objectively needed grocery stores and pharmacies more than it needed gazebos. I don't know, she said quietly, and that's terrifying. They talked for another hour before Rachel had to go. Lena sat in the dark afterward, too tired to move, too wired to sleep. Her phone buzzed. An email from Adrian, sent at 11 p.m. because apparently he never stopped working. Subject: Site visit schedule. Miss Brooks, Jennifer will coordinate site access for next week. I've arranged meetings with 3 community leaders who weren't satisfied with the official approval process. They have concerns worth hearing. Also attached, residential demographics for the surrounding 12 blocks. You'll notice the displacement risk patterns. Factor them into your integration design. Lena read it 3 times. He'd arranged meetings with people who opposed the project, was actively pointing out displacement risks, was asking her to design solutions for problems he could have ignored. None of it made sense. Unless Adrian Cole was exactly what he claimed to be, someone who understood that caring about communities was financially smart in the long run, even if it looked like weakness in the short term. Lena opened the demographic data, spent 2 hours analyzing displacement patterns, income vulnerability, rent burden percentages. By 1 a.m., she had the outline of an integration proposal that might actually protect the most vulnerable residents. By 2 a.m., she hated herself for caring about a project she'd promised to sabotage. By 3 a.m., she was asleep at her desk, laptop still glowing with half-finished designs that looked suspiciously like genuine attempts to make Brooklyn Commons work for the people who lived there. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of work Lena couldn't quite bring herself to sabotage. Site visits showed her families who needed the grocery store more than the park, community leaders who'd been fighting for development investment for years, kids whose parents wanted jobs, not playgrounds. Every day she expected to find the catch, the hidden corruption, the moment where Adrian's mask would slip and reveal the monster underneath. Instead, she found competence. Brutal, exhausting competence that acknowledged problems and solved them with the same cold efficiency he applied to everything else. Thursday afternoon, she was reviewing contractor bids in her office when Adrian appeared in her doorway without warning. Site visit tomorrow, Oakland Park area, 6 a.m. Lena looked up. Why 6 a.m.? Because that's when you see how people actually use the space, not during official visiting hours, real usage patterns. He checked his phone. Bring comfortable shoes. We'll be walking for several hours. You're coming personally? I designed the development. I should see what I'm replacing. He started to leave, then paused. Jennifer mentioned you've been working late, every night this week. The deadline is tight. The deadline is 6 weeks away. You have time. I prefer being thorough. Something almost like amusement flickered across Adrian's face. You're allowed to go home, Miss Brooks. The office will still be here tomorrow. Why do you care when I leave? Because exhausted architects make expensive mistakes, and because... He stopped himself. Because what? Because I recognize obsessive work habits when I see them. I have the same ones. They're not sustainable. He met her eyes directly. Go home. That's not a suggestion. He left before Lena could figure out if she'd just been ordered or cared about. She went home. Couldn't sleep. Spent the night researching Adrian instead of resting. Found an article from 6 years ago, back when he still did interviews. Before his wife died. Before he became the cold machine everyone feared now. The interviewer had asked him why he became an architect. Because buildings outlive people, he'd said. You can create something that serves communities for generations. That matters more than any individual legacy. Lena read that line 15 times, wondering when exactly Adrian Cole had stopped believing it, or if maybe he still did, but had just learned to hide it behind spreadsheets and corporate acquisitions. 6 a.m. Friday morning, Lena met Adrian outside Oakland Park. He'd traded his suit for dark jeans and a jacket that looked expensive but practical. No tie, no tablet, just him and a camera, looking more human than she'd ever seen him. Thank you for being on time, he said. You're my boss. It's not optional. It's professional courtesy. Different thing. He gestured toward the park entrance. After you. They walked in silence at first. The park was busier than Lena expected. A man running laps around the cracked basketball court, 2 women doing Tai Chi near the broken fountain, a group of teenagers sitting on benches clearly skipping school. Adrian photographed everything, not like a developer cataloging property, but like someone documenting something worth remembering. You designed the gazebo plan, he said eventually. Why that specific location? Sightlines. It's visible from 3 different entry points, which increases safety. And it's near the existing power lines, so we could add lighting without major electrical work. Smart. He took another photo. What about the community garden section? Southern exposure, best light, and close enough to the street that elderly residents don't have to walk too far with heavy water containers. You've thought about who uses this space, not just how it looks. That's the job. Designing for actual humans instead of theoretical ones. Adrian lowered his camera, looking at her directly. That's exactly what I need for Brooklyn Commons. Design for the real people who'll live there, not the demographic categories in my spreadsheets. They kept walking. Adrian asked questions, detailed technical questions that proved he understood architecture better than most people who called themselves developers. Lena answered, and somewhere in the conversation, she forgot to be angry. They were standing near the old fountain when Adrian spoke again. My wife designed parks. Lena went still. This was the first personal thing he'd ever volunteered. Before Sophie was born, Emma worked for the city planning department. She believed public spaces could change neighborhoods, make them safer, healthier, more connected. His voice stayed even, but something underneath it cracked slightly. She would have liked your gazebo design, the way you thought about sight lines and safety. What happened to her? Lena asked quietly. Car accident, 4 years ago. Drunk driver ran a red light. He didn't look at Lena, just kept staring at the fountain. After that, I couldn't keep designing things that made me feel. It hurt too much. So I switched to numbers, profit margins, things that couldn't hurt me back. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was practical. He finally turned toward her. But I still remember what Emma said about public spaces, that they're worth protecting even when the math doesn't work. The communities need beauty, not just services. Then why are you destroying this one? Because I found a way to do both. Services and beauty. Profit and community. Just doesn't look like what you expected. Lena wanted to ask what he meant, but a voice interrupted them. Mr. Cole? Is that you? An elderly woman approached, Mrs. Chen, one of the community leaders Lena had interviewed last week. She tended the tomato plants Lena had noticed on her first visit. Mrs. Chen. Adrian's expression shifted into something professional but not cold. Good to see you. I heard you were building something here, taking my garden. Mrs. Chen looked between Adrian and Lena. Is it true? Yes, Adrian said simply. But I'd like to talk to you about relocating your garden to a permanent space with better soil and water access. Would you have time to discuss it? Mrs. Chen blinked. You want to move my garden, not destroy it? I want to improve it, if you're willing. They talked for 20 minutes. Adrian took notes on his phone, asked questions about soil pH and sun requirements, and which vegetables grew best in Brooklyn's climate. He knew more about community gardens than Lena would have guessed. When Mrs. Chen finally left, she looked less hostile than when she'd arrived. You're paying to relocate her garden, Lena said. It's cheaper than dealing with community opposition during construction. Practical. It's kind. It's both. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. He checked his phone. I have a board meeting in an hour, but I want you to think about something. What? Brooklyn Commons isn't destroying Oakland Park. It's replacing something failing with something sustainable. Your job is making sure the replacement actually serves the people who need it. He met her eyes. Can you do that? Or are you still looking for proof I'm the villain? Lena didn't answer, couldn't answer, because she was starting to suspect the truth was more complicated than villains and heroes, and that terrified her more than anything else. Adrian walked away without waiting for an answer, leaving Lena standing alone near the fountain with questions burning holes in her certainty. She watched him disappear into a black car that had been waiting at the curb, probably on standby since 6 a.m. because men like Adrian Cole didn't waste time with parking. The park felt different now, less like something worth dying for, more like something already dying that she'd been too stubborn to admit. The cracked basketball court. The broken fountain that hadn't worked in 3 years. The benches covered in graffiti that nobody bothered cleaning anymore because the city had stopped caring about this neighborhood decades ago. Mrs. Chen's tomato plants were the only thing thriving, and even those grew in plastic containers because the soil was contaminated from old industrial runoff. Lena's phone buzzed. Rachel, texting from work. How's the site visit? Found your smoking gun yet? Lena stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. He knew about Mrs. Chen's garden, offered to relocate it somewhere better. That's surprisingly not evil? I know. That's the problem. She pocketed her phone and spent another hour walking the park perimeter, taking measurements and photos for integration design she was actually starting to care about. When she finally left, the sun was higher, and the teenagers had been replaced by mothers with strollers navigating the broken sidewalks. One of them recognized Lena from her community interviews last month. "You're the architect, right? The one asking about the park?" "Yeah, Lena Brooks. I heard they're tearing it down, building something fancy." The woman, maybe 25 with twin toddlers strapped into a double stroller, looked tired in a way Lena recognized. The kind of tired that came from working 2 jobs and still barely making rent. "Is it true they're putting in a grocery store? A real one, not just a bodega?" "That's the plan." "Thank God. You know how far I have to go for fresh vegetables? 40 minutes on 2 buses with these 2. She gestured at her kids. "My son has asthma. Doctor says he needs better nutrition. But what am I supposed to do when the closest real grocery store might as well be in another country?" Lena hadn't thought about that. Hadn't factored in food deserts and public transportation and the reality of being poor with kids who needed things you couldn't easily provide. "The new development will have a full-service grocery," Lena heard herself say, "and a pharmacy. And the construction phase is supposed to prioritize local hiring. Will people like me be able to afford it? The apartments, I mean?" And there it was. The question Lena had been asking herself for 2 weeks. "I don't know," she admitted. "I'm trying to design protections into the plan. Affordable units, displacement prevention, community benefits agreements. But I can't promise anything yet." The woman nodded slowly. "At least someone's trying. That's more than we usually get." She moved on, pushing her stroller over cracked pavement that would probably break an ankle someday, and Lena stood there feeling the weight of her own privilege. She'd been so focused on saving a park that she'd forgotten to ask whether the park was actually serving the people who needed help most. A beautiful gazebo didn't cure asthma. Community gardens didn't replace grocery stores 40 minutes away by bus. Lena went back to the office and worked until midnight, redesigning the entire integration proposal from scratch. Not trying to save Oakland Park anymore, trying to make Brooklyn Commons into something that wouldn't destroy the people it claimed to serve. She was so deep in affordable housing ratios that she didn't notice Adrian standing in her doorway until he spoke. "I thought I told you to go home at reasonable hours." Lena jumped, nearly knocking over her cold coffee. "Jesus, don't you knock?" "Door was open. I saw your light on from the hallway." He looked as tired as she felt, tie loosened, jacket gone, sleeves rolled up. "It's almost 1 a.m. "So why are you still here?" "Board meeting ran late. Then I had calls with Hong Kong investors." He leaned against the doorframe. "What's your excuse?" "Redesigning the entire affordable housing component because I finally stopped being an idealistic idiot and started thinking about actual human needs." Lena rubbed her eyes. "Did you know there's a food desert covering 8 blocks around Oakland Park? The nearest real grocery store is a 40-minute bus ride." "I know. That's why Brooklyn Commons includes a 20,000 square foot grocery store with a community partnership program." Adrian walked into her office uninvited, looking at her screen. "What are you changing?" "Everything." The affordable unit distribution was clustered in the back of the development, away from amenities. "That's segregation with better marketing. I'm redistributing them throughout the building, mixed income floors, same access to gyms, rooftop spaces, everything. That'll reduce the luxury rental rates wealthy tenants pay premium for separation. Then charge them premium for not being terrible humans. Market it as progressive urban living or whatever." Adrian was quiet for a moment, still studying her screen. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. Actually smiled. Small, but real. Emma would have said exactly that. "Your wife?" She had this theory that rich people would pay extra to feel morally superior, make them think they're part of some enlightened community experiment. They'll accept lower segregation in exchange for bragging rights. He pulled up a chair, sitting beside Lena without asking. "Show me what else you're changing." They worked together until 3 a.m., Adrian pointing out structural constraints and financial realities, Lena pushing back with community needs and ethical requirements. Arguing, compromising, finding solutions neither of them would have reached alone. At some point, Jennifer appeared with fresh coffee and sandwiches, looking completely unsurprised to find them both there at this hour. "Should I tell your driver to wait, Mr. Cole?" "Send him home. I'll get a car later." When Jennifer left, Lena looked at Adrian properly for the first time that night. He looked different without the corporate armor, more human, lines around his eyes from stress or grief or both, the kind of tired that lived in your bones. "Do you ever actually sleep?" she asked. "When I need to. You?" "Same. We're both terrible at this," Adrian said, not looking up from the housing calculations he was reviewing. "Work-life balance, normal human functioning, all of it." "Is that why you never talk about your daughter? Because you're too busy working to actually see her?" The words came out sharper than Lena intended. Adrian went still. "Sorry," she said quickly. "That was accurate." He set down his pen. "Sophie is 7. She lives with my mother-in-law during the week because I work too much to be a real parent. I see her weekends. Sometimes. When I'm not traveling or managing acquisitions or pretending I'm holding everything together." The honesty was startling. "Does she understand?" Lena asked quietly. "She's 7. She understands that Daddy's busy and Grandma makes better pancakes." Adrian's voice stayed even, but something underneath it cracked. "Emma's mother blames me for the accident. Says if I'd been driving that night instead of working late, Emma would still be alive. She's probably right." "You can't know that." "I can know I chose work over being there. I can know Emma died going to a client dinner I was supposed to attend. I can know my daughter lost her mother because I was too busy building an empire to drive my own wife to a restaurant." He stood abruptly. "I should go. It's late." "Adrian, wait." But he was already gone, footsteps echoing down the empty hallway. Lena sat alone in her office, staring at the affordable housing plans they'd been working on together, trying to reconcile the cold billionaire from the airplane with the broken father who'd just walked away. She thought about the coat, the blanket, the way he'd listened to Mrs. Chen talk about tomatoes like it mattered, the $3 million spent on integration architecture that didn't increase profit, a man trying to save communities because he couldn't save his wife, or maybe because he could save something, even if it wasn't the thing he'd lost. Lena finally went home at 4 a.m. and slept for 3 hours before her alarm went off. Showered, dressed, made it back to the office by 9 because the preliminary presentation was in 5 days, and she still had work to do. Jennifer stopped her in the hallway. "Mr. Cole wants to see you. His office." Lena's stomach dropped. "Did I do something wrong?" "I don't think so. He just asked me to send you up when you arrived." Jennifer hesitated. "He seemed off this morning. More than usual." Adrian's office occupied the entire 40th floor corner, windows on 2 sides, view stretching to New Jersey, minimalist furniture, architectural models on shelves, photographs on his desk that Lena couldn't see from the doorway. He was standing at the window when she entered, hands in his pockets, staring out at the city. "You wanted to see me?" Lena said. "Close the door." She did, waited. Adrian turned around, and his expression was unreadable. "I owe you an apology. Last night was unprofessional. My personal issues aren't your concern." "You don't have to. I do. You work for me. There are boundaries I shouldn't cross, and discussing my dead wife and failed parenting at 3 a.m. crosses them." He moved to his desk but didn't sit. "It won't happen again." "What if I wanted it to happen again?" Adrian looked at her sharply. "Excuse me?" "What if I wanted to know you as a person, not just as my boss?" Lena took a step closer. "You know things about me. You've seen my designs, read my background, probably have a file somewhere detailing every professional mistake I've ever made. But I know almost nothing about you except what's in business articles and what you accidentally revealed at 3 in the morning. That's intentional. I know, but maybe it shouldn't be. Miss Brooks, Lena, if we're going to work together on something that actually matters, stop calling me Miss Brooks like I'm a stranger you're tolerating." Something shifted in Adrian's expression. "This is a bad idea." "Probably, but I think we're past good ideas." Lena gestured at the city beyond his windows. "You're building a $40 million development that could save or destroy a neighborhood. I'm designing the difference between those outcomes. We're already in deep. Might as well be honest while we're here." Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he walked to his desk and pulled a photograph from the frame, handing it to Lena. A woman with dark hair and a bright smile, holding a little girl who looked maybe 3. Both of them laughing at whoever was taking the picture. Emma and Sophie, Adrian said quietly. 2 months before the accident, we were at Prospect Park. Sophie had just learned to ride a bike without training wheels. The photo hurt to look at. So much happiness in a single frozen moment. She's beautiful, Lena said. Your daughter looks exactly like her. I know, sometimes it's... He stopped himself. Sophie asked me last week why I don't smile anymore. 7 years old and she's already noticed I'm broken. You're not broken, you're grieving. 4 years is a long time to grieve. There's no timeline for losing someone you loved. Adrian took the photo back, returning it to his desk where he could see it while he worked. After Emma died, I couldn't design anymore. Every building reminded me of things we'd talked about creating together. Every park made me think of her plans for better public spaces. So I stopped creating and started acquiring. Buying other people's firms, other people's dreams, turning architecture into numbers that couldn't hurt me. But you kept the community focus, Lena said. Brooklyn Commons isn't just profit. You're actually trying to help. Because Emma would have wanted that. And because Sophie deserves to grow up in a world where her father did something meaningful with his grief instead of just drowning in it. He met Lena's eyes directly. That's why I need you on this project. You still care about the things I had to stop caring about to survive. You can make this development into something Emma would have approved of. That's a lot of pressure. I know, but you're the only architect I've met in 4 years who designs for actual humans instead of theoretical demographics. The only one who got angry at me for being practical because you understood that some things are worth being impractical about. He almost smiled, even if your gazebo design was financially impossible. It was beautiful, though. It was. That's why I kept a copy. Lena stared at him. You what? Adrian pulled up his tablet, navigating to a file folder. There was her Oakland Park design, every version she'd created over the past 6 months, saved, studied. I've been using these as references for the Brooklyn Commons green space component, he said. Your sightline thinking, your safety-first approach, the way you factored in elderly access and children's needs, all of it is integrated into the current plans. You're incorporating my park design into your development, pieces of it. The parts that work, adapted for a different context, but still fundamentally yours. He showed her the renderings. Sure enough, elements from her gazebo design appeared in the Brooklyn Commons Plaza. Modified, yes, but recognizably hers. Why didn't you tell me? Because you were convinced I was destroying your work. I wanted you to discover on your own that I was actually trying to preserve the best parts of it. Lena didn't know what to say. Didn't know how to process that Adrian had been protecting her designs while she'd been plotting to destroy his empire. I've been looking for dirt on you, she admitted. Proof that you're corrupt. That Brooklyn Commons is hiding something illegal or unethical. I know. You know? IT flagged your search patterns 3 days after you started working here. You've been accessing files outside your clearance level, cross-referencing financial records, looking for discrepancies. Adrian's voice stayed calm. I told them to give you full access to everything. If you wanted to audit me, I'd rather you find the truth than invented suspicions. And you're not worried what I'll find? No. Because Brooklyn Commons is exactly what it appears to be, a profitable development with genuine community benefits. No hidden corruption, no secret evil plan, just complicated economics and difficult trade-offs. He paused. Did you find anything? No, Lena admitted. Everything checks out. Community approval is real. Financial projections are conservative. Environmental impact has been properly assessed. It's all legitimate. Disappointing? Honestly, a little. It would be easier if you were actually a villain. Sorry to be boring. Adrian closed his tablet. Does this mean you're done looking for reasons to hate me? I don't hate you. You did 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, I didn't know you carried a picture of your dead wife to work every day. Or that you've been incorporating my park designs into your development, or that you spend $3 million on integration architecture because your 7-year-old daughter asked why you don't smile anymore. Those things don't change the facts. Brooklyn Commons still replaces Oakland Park. People will still be displaced. Rents will still increase. The neighborhood will change whether we want it to or not. I know, but at least now I understand that you're trying to make the change less destructive. That counts for something. Adrian studied her for a long moment. You're different from what I expected. Meaning? Meaning most architects I've worked with either sold out immediately for money or quit on principle and accomplished nothing. You stayed. You fought. You're actually making the project better instead of just accepting it or abandoning it. Emma would have done the same thing, wouldn't she? Yes, she would have. Something softened in Adrian's expression. She would have liked you. You have the same stubborn optimism about making broken systems work for people they're designed to exclude. I'm not optimistic. I'm just too stubborn to accept that caring about people is financially impossible. That's optimism. You just don't call it that. Jennifer's voice came through the intercom. Mr. Cole, your 10 o'clock is here. Tell them I need 5 more minutes. He looked back at Lena. The preliminary presentation is Monday. Are you ready? Almost. I need to finalize the affordable housing integration and run final numbers on displacement mitigation. Maybe another 60 hours of work. That's 4 days away. 60 hours is impossible if I sleep like a normal person. Yes. Good thing I don't. Lena, Adrian, I know what I'm doing. This project matters. I'll sleep after we present. He looked like he wanted to argue, but recognized the same obsessive work drive he saw in himself. Fine. But you're taking Sunday off. That's not negotiable. Why Sunday? Because I'm taking Sunday off, and if I can force myself to rest, you can too. He walked toward his office door, opening it for her. Also because Sophie's birthday is Sunday, and I promised to actually be present instead of distracted by work. Set a good example for once. You're really taking a full day off? I'm going to try. Emma's mother will probably have a heart attack from shock. He paused. You could come. To the party. If you wanted. Lena's heart did something complicated. That seems personal? It is. But you asked to know me as a person, not just your boss. This is what that looks like. 7-year-olds, terrible cake, probably some kind of princess theme that will make me want to die. His expression stayed neutral, but his eyes showed vulnerability he usually hid. Fair warning, Emma's mother hates me. Most of the guests will be Sophie's friends' parents who think I'm a neglectful workaholic. You'll be surrounded by people judging me in real time. Sounds terrible. It will be. What time should I be there? Something flickered across Adrian's face. Surprise, maybe. Or relief. 2 p.m. I'll text you the address. He held out his hand. Partners? At least until we get through Monday's presentation? Lena shook his hand. Partners. She went back to her office and worked for the next 4 days with focus she didn't know she possessed. The preliminary presentation came together piece by piece. Integration architecture that preserved community character while enabling development. Affordable housing distributed throughout the building instead of segregated. Displacement protections built into lease agreements. Commercial space requirements that prioritized local businesses. It wasn't perfect. Nothing that involved $40 million and corporate profit could be perfect. But it was better than what would have existed without her. Saturday night, Lena finally admitted the presentation was as ready as it would ever be. Went home. Actually slept for 8 hours. Woke up Sunday morning with the strange realization that she'd agreed to attend a 7-year-old's birthday party with her boss, who she'd been planning to destroy 2 weeks ago. Rachel called at noon. Please tell me you're not actually going to this man's daughter's birthday party. I'm actually going to this man's daughter's birthday party. Lena, this is insane. This is how I ended up married to my boss, insane. It's not like that. He's grieving. I'm helping. It's complicated. It's complicated because you're developing feelings for him. I'm not. You've been working until 3 a.m. together. You're incorporating each other's designs. He invited you to his daughter's birthday party. These are feelings, Lena. Acknowledge them. Even if I had feelings, which I'm not confirming, he's my boss. And he's still in love with his dead wife, and he's a billionaire who lives in a completely different world. It's impossible. Impossible like your financially unviable park design? That's different. Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, you've spent 3 weeks proving that impossible things can work if you care enough to make them work. Lena hung up on her, mostly because Rachel was right, and she wasn't ready to admit it. She showed up at Adrian's address at 2 p.m. exactly. The house was in Brooklyn Heights, A brownstone that probably cost more than Lena would earn in her entire lifetime. Balloons tied to the front gate. Children's laughter coming from the backyard. Adrian answered the door himself, and Lena almost didn't recognize him. Jeans, a plain gray sweater. No jacket, no tie, no corporate armor, just a man who looked nervous about hosting a children's party. "You came," he said. "You invited me." "I know, but I thought you might reconsider. Decide it was too weird." "It is too weird, but I'm here anyway." He smiled. Small, real, the kind she'd only seen a few times. "Fair warning. Sophie knows you're the architect working on Daddy's project. She's been asking questions I don't know how to answer." "Like what?" "Like whether you're my friend, whether you're coming to more family things, whether you like princesses." He held the door open for her. "I told her you were a colleague. She told me that was a boring word and I should try harder." "Smart kid." "Too smart. She gets it from Emma." The backyard was chaos. 20 children running around, parents clustered in groups talking, an elaborate Princess Castle bounce house taking up half the lawn. And in the middle of it all, a little girl with dark hair and her mother's bright smile, wearing a tiara that was slightly crooked. Sophie spotted Adrian and ran over, then stopped when she saw Lena. "Is this her, the architect lady?" "This is Lena Brooks," Adrian said. "Lena, this is Sophie." Sophie studied Lena with the intense focus of someone who'd inherited her father's assessment skills. "Do you like princesses?" "I think they're cool, especially the ones who build things and solve problems. Like Elsa, she builds ice castles." Sophie grabbed Lena's hand without warning. "Come see my bounce house. Daddy got me the big one because I'm 7 now and that's basically grown up." She dragged Lena toward the Princess Castle, and Adrian followed with an expression somewhere between apologetic and amused. "Sorry," he said quietly. "She's excited about meeting new people who aren't her grandmother's friends." "It's fine, she's great." And Sophie was great. Confident, talkative. The kind of kid who made everyone around her feel included. She introduced Lena to her friends, showed off her presents, explained in great detail why turning 7 was significantly better than being 6. Lena watched Adrian with his daughter and saw someone completely different from the cold billionaire who'd insulted her park design at 30,000 feet. He was patient with the chaos, helped kids into the bounce house, fixed Sophie's tiara when it fell off, listened to 7-year-old logic about why they absolutely needed to have cake before lunch. Emma's mother appeared eventually. Older woman, elegant, with Emma's eyes and a hardness around her mouth. "You must be the architect," she said to Lena. "Not friendly." "Evaluating." "Lena Brooks. Thank you for including me today." "I didn't. Adrian did." She glanced at where Adrian was helping Sophie cut her cake. "My son-in-law has many talents. Knowing when to stop working isn't one of them." "He's trying." "Is he? Or is he bringing work to his daughter's birthday by inviting employees?" The accusation stung because it wasn't entirely wrong. "I'm here as his friend," Lena said quietly, "not his employee." "Adrian doesn't have friends. He has business relationships he hasn't monetized yet." "Maybe that's changing." Emma's mother looked at her for a long moment. "I hope you're right. For Sophie's sake. She needs a father who's actually present, not just physically here while his mind is at the office." She walked away before Lena could respond. Adrian appeared beside her holding 2 plates of birthday cake. "I see you met Margaret. She's protective of Sophie. She blames me for Emma's death. Has every right to." He handed Lena a plate. "Cake's terrible. Sophie picked it because it has a frozen theme." They ate terrible cake in silence, watching Sophie play with her friends. "Thank you for coming," Adrian said eventually. "I know this is strange, but Sophie's been asking about my work more lately, and I think she wanted to see that I actually talk to real humans outside of business meetings. I'm glad I came. She's wonderful." "She is. I don't deserve her." "Adrian, I work 70-hour weeks and miss school events and can't remember the last time I actually played with her instead of just existing in the same room while answering emails." His voice stayed level, but the pain underneath was obvious. "I'm trying to be better, but I don't know how to stop being the person grief turned me into." Lena set down her cake plate. "Can I tell you something?" "Always. The park design you saw on the plane, I drew that at 2 a.m. after working a 16-hour day because I couldn't sleep and didn't want to go home to an empty apartment. I've been using work to avoid dealing with my own life for so long, I don't remember what having a life even looks like. She looked at him directly. You're not the only one who turned into a work machine to survive pain. You're just the one with more money and power doing it. What pain are you surviving? Poverty. Watching my parents work themselves to death and still lose everything. Growing up knowing no matter how hard I tried, I'd never have enough. I became an architect because I wanted to build things that would protect people like my family. But somewhere along the way, I forgot that protecting people includes protecting myself. Adrian was quiet for a moment. We're both terrible at being human. Yeah, we really are. Maybe we could be terrible at it together. Help each other remember how to actually live instead of just work. Is that what this is? You helping me remember how to live? I don't know what this is. Adrian turned toward her, and his gray eyes showed something she'd never seen before. Uncertainty, vulnerability, hope. But I know I haven't wanted to figure something out this badly in 4 years. Before Lena could respond, Sophie ran over demanding that Daddy and Lena both come jump in the bounce house because it was her birthday, and that meant everyone had to do what she said. They jumped in the bounce house. Adrian looked ridiculous and happy, his corporate composure completely shattered by a 7-year-old's demands. Lena laughed harder than she had in months, and somewhere in the chaos of bouncing and shrieking children, something inside her cracked open. She was falling for Adrian Cole. Had probably been falling since he draped his coat over her shoulders at 30,000 feet. And she had absolutely no idea what to do about it. The party wound down around 6. Parents collected their sugar-crashed children. Margaret gave Adrian a look that said she'd noticed him laughing with Lena and had opinions about it. Sophie hugged Lena goodbye and made her promise to come back soon. Adrian walked Lena to her car. Tomorrow's the presentation, he said. I know. I'm ready. Lena. He stopped walking, and she turned to face him. Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever the community board says, I want you to know that this project is better because you're part of it. Not just the design. Everything. Adrian, let me finish. He took a breath. I've spent 4 years being cold and practical and emotionally unavailable because it was easier than feeling anything. But you walked into my life arguing about financially impossible parks and refusing to accept that caring about people was useless. And you reminded me that the person I used to be, the one Emma fell in love with, is still in here somewhere. Lena's heart was racing. What are you saying? I'm saying that tomorrow we present a development that might actually help people because you made me care about helping people again. And I'm saying that I don't want this to end when Brooklyn Commons is finished, whatever this is between us. You're my boss. I know. You're still grieving your wife. I know that too. This is complicated and messy and probably a terrible idea. I know, but I'm tired of only doing practical things that don't hurt. I want to try something impractical that might actually matter. Lena looked at him. Really looked. Saw past the billionaire facade to the grieving father trying to be present for his daughter. The widower still carrying his wife's photo to work. The architect who'd stopped creating because creation hurt too much. A man who'd given her his coat when she was cold, even though kindness was supposed to be impractical. Okay, she said quietly. Okay. Let's try something impractical and see what happens. Adrian smiled, really smiled, the kind of smile that transformed his entire face. And Lena knew she was in serious trouble, because she wasn't just falling anymore, she'd already fallen. Monday morning arrived too fast and not fast enough. Lena got to the office at 6, even though the community board presentation wasn't until 2 p.m. She told herself it was about final preparation, reviewing slides, double-checking numbers, making sure every detail was perfect. But really, she just needed to be there, near the work, near him. Adrian was already in the conference room when she arrived, surrounded by printouts and architectural models, looking like he hadn't slept. He probably hadn't. Hey, Lena said from the doorway. He looked up and something in his expression softened when he saw her. Hey, you're early. So are you. Couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about what could go wrong today. Everything's ready. The presentation is solid. I know. But this is the first project in 4 years that I actually care about the outcome beyond profit margins. He gestured at the models spread across the table. If the board rejects this, we lose 8 months of work and community trust. If they approve it, But we execute poorly, we destroy a neighborhood. There's no version where failure doesn't hurt. Lena walked into the room, standing across the table from him. You're scared. Terrified. Welcome to caring about things again. It's horrible. Yeah, but it means you're alive. Adrian met her eyes. Is that what yesterday was about? You trying to remind me I'm still alive? Yesterday was about a 7-year-old girl who wanted her dad to jump in a bounce house. Everything else was just bonus. The everything else being you and me deciding to try something impractical? That too. They stood there in silence for a moment, the air between them charged with things neither of them knew how to say. Then Jennifer appeared in the doorway, breaking the moment. Mr. Cole? The community board just confirmed. They're sending 8 members instead of the usual 5, including Councilman Rodriguez. Adrian's expression shifted back to business immediately. Rodriguez hates development projects. Why is he coming? According to his office, there's been community pushback. People worried about displacement and gentrification. He wants to make sure their concerns are addressed. How much pushback? Enough that there's a protest planned outside the building at 1 p.m. Lena felt her stomach drop. A protest. Apparently someone's been organizing residents, telling them Brooklyn Commons is a gentrification scheme designed to push out poor families. Jennifer looked apologetic. I'm sorry, I just found out 20 minutes ago. After Jennifer left, Adrian pulled up something on his tablet, a social media page filled with posts about Brooklyn Commons, photos of Oakland Park with captions like Save Our Community and Stop Billionaire Greed and Adrian Cole wants to destroy Brooklyn. Lena read through those posts, her chest tightening. This is my fault. How is this your fault? Because when I started this project, I was looking for dirt on you. I talked to community members, asked questions about whether the development was corrupt, whether you could be trusted. She couldn't look at him. I probably planted seeds of doubt without meaning to. You were doing your job, asking hard questions. I was trying to build a case against you, and now people think you're a monster, and it's because I made them think that. Lena. Adrian's voice was firm enough to make her look up. People were always going to be suspicious. Change scares people, especially people who've been abandoned by every other development promise. This isn't your fault. It's just what happens when you try to build something new. So what do? We present the truth. Show them what we've actually designed. Hope it's enough. He checked his watch. We have 7 hours. Let's make sure every single detail of this presentation is bulletproof. They worked through the morning with focused intensity, anticipating every possible question and objection. Adrian drilled Lena on displacement statistics, affordable housing ratios, local hiring requirements. She pushed back on his financial projections, making sure the numbers actually supported community benefits claims. At noon, they ordered food neither of them ate. At 1, they heard the protest start outside. Chanting, signs. People who thought they were fighting to save their neighborhood from someone who wanted to destroy it. Lena looked out the window at the crowd gathering below. Maybe 100 people. Old women who reminded her of Mrs. Chen. Young mothers with strollers, teenagers holding signs, all of them scared of losing the only home they'd ever known. They're not wrong to protest, she said quietly. Adrian came to stand beside her. No, they're not. Every development promise they've ever received has been a lie. Why should they trust us? They shouldn't. Trust has to be earned, and we haven't earned it yet. He pulled out his phone. Cancel the conference room reservation. We're doing this presentation outside. Lena turned to stare at him. What? They came here to be heard. The least we can do is meet them where they are. He was already texting Jennifer. Set up presentation equipment in front of the building, portable screen, microphone, the architectural models. If people want to protest, they can do it while actually seeing what they're protesting. Adrian, that's insane. The community board can join us outside or stay in their comfortable conference room. Their choice. He looked at Lena directly. Emma used to say that architects who design for communities but won't stand in front of those communities are cowards. I've been a coward for 4 years. Not today. 20 minutes later, they were standing on the steps of Cole Enterprises headquarters in front of a hostile crowd, trying to set up a presentation while people shouted questions and accusations. The community board members looked uncomfortable but stayed, probably because refusing to listen would look worse than enduring whatever chaos this became. Adrian stepped up to the microphone. The crowd didn't quiet down. My name is Adrian Cole, he said, his voice carrying over the noise. "I'm the developer you're here to protest. And before we start, I want to say something important. You're right to be angry." That got their attention. The shouting diminished slightly. "You're right to be suspicious of developers who promise jobs and deliver luxury apartments you can't afford. You're right to protect your neighborhood from people who see your home as just another investment opportunity. You're right not to trust me." Adrian paused. "But I'm asking you to look at what we've actually designed before you decide what we're trying to do." He gestured to Lena, who pulled up the first rendering on the portable screen. Brooklyn Commons in full detail, every element visible. "This is a $40 million development," Adrian continued. 200 residential units, 60,000 square feet of retail, 20,000 square feet of office space. It will replace Oakland Park and 3 surrounding blocks. That's not a lie or a secret, that's the reality. More shouting. Someone threw something that bounced off the steps. "But here's what else is real," Adrian said, not backing down. 40% of the residential units are permanently designated affordable housing, not temporarily affordable, permanently, built into the deed restrictions so no future owner can change it. Lena pulled up the next slide, showing the affordable unit distribution. "The grocery store you see in this rendering?" Adrian pointed to it. "That's a partnership with a community-owned co-op. Local control, local hiring, prices regulated to serve neighborhood income levels. The pharmacy next to it operates on the same model." He walked down the steps, moving closer to the crowd, no longer protected by the microphone. Lena's heart jumped into her throat. "The construction jobs," Adrian continued, his voice carrying even without amplification. 300 positions with priority hiring for residents within a 2-mile radius. Not just labor positions, skilled trades, project management, administrative roles. We've partnered with the Brooklyn Trades Council to provide training for residents who want those jobs. A woman in the front of the crowd spoke up. "What about people who already live in those buildings? Where do they go during construction?" "Temporary relocation assistance funded by Cole Enterprises. Comparable housing, moving costs covered, right of first return when construction completes." Adrian looked directly at her. "You shouldn't have to leave your neighborhood to make room for improvement. The improvement should include you." Councilman Rodriguez stepped forward, looking skeptical. "Mr. Cole, these promises sound good on paper, but how do we know you'll actually follow through? What's stopping you from changing these terms once the board approves the project?" "Legal enforcement." Lena spoke for the first time, her voice shakier than she wanted. "Every community benefit Adrian just described is written into the development agreement as binding terms. If Cole Enterprises violates any of them, the community board has legal grounds to halt construction and void the permit." She pulled up the actual contract language on the screen, letting people read it themselves. "This isn't a promise," Lena continued. "It's a legal requirement, and I've spent the last month making sure every protection is bulletproof because I didn't trust him either." That got people's attention. Someone called out, "Who are you?" "Lena Brooks. I'm the integration architect on this project. I grew up poor. My parents lost everything to developers who made promises they never kept. When Adrian's company acquired my firm, I thought he was just another billionaire destroying communities for profit." She glanced at Adrian, who nodded for her to continue. "I was wrong. Not about the destruction part. Oakland Park is going away, and that loss is real. But I was wrong about the motivation." She pulled up the rendering of the integrated community spaces. Elements from her original park design, adapted and expanded. This section here, that's a public plaza with the same sight lines I designed for Oakland Park. Free access, no commercial requirement. These playground areas, designed for the same age ranges that currently use the park, with better equipment and safety features. This community center, Lena pointed to a building that hadn't been in the original plans. That wasn't in Adrian's first proposal. I fought for it, and he built it into the design because he actually listened. Mrs. Chen's voice came from somewhere in the crowd. "What about my garden?" Adrian smiled, actually smiled. "Mrs. Chen, I've been looking for you. I have something to show you." He pulled up a specific rendering, a rooftop garden on the residential building. Beautiful, professionally designed with raised beds and irrigation systems and a greenhouse structure. 1,600 square feet of community garden space, Adrian said. Professional soil, proper drainage, year-round growing capability. You'd manage it, decide who gets plots, what gets grown, all of it. Cole Enterprises provides the infrastructure. You provide the expertise. Mrs. Chen pushed forward to see the screen better. Lena watched her face transform from suspicion to surprise to something that might have been hope. "You'd really build this?" she asked. "It's already in the construction budget. We break ground in 6 months if the board approves. You could be planning by next spring." The crowd was quieter now, still skeptical, but listening, actually listening. Councilman Rodriguez wasn't done, though. "Mr. Cole, you still haven't addressed the core concern. 40% affordable housing sounds good, but 60% luxury units will drive up property values in the surrounding blocks. Rents will increase. Property taxes will increase. Within 5 years, the people you're claiming to help won't be able to afford living anywhere near this development." It was the smartest question anyone had asked, the one Lena had been dreading. Adrian didn't hesitate. "You're absolutely right, which is why the development agreement includes a 5-block radius commercial rent stabilization program." He pulled up documentation Lena hadn't seen before. New documentation. Cole Enterprises will subsidize commercial rent increases for existing small businesses within that radius, capped at 3% annually for 10 years. Bakeries, bodegas, laundromats, all of them protected from displacement by property value increases we're causing. Adrian looked at Rodriguez directly. "It costs us money. It reduces long-term property values. It's terrible business, but it's the right thing to do." "When did you add this?" Lena asked quietly, stunned. "Last night, after you left Sophie's party. I kept thinking about what you said about protecting people, and I realized we were missing the businesses. They're part of the community, too." Lena felt something crack open in her chest. He'd gone back to work after a full day of being present for his daughter, after finally admitting he wanted to try being human again, and he'd used that time to add protections that would cost him millions. Rodriguez was reading through the documentation on his tablet, looking for the trap. Lena could see him searching, wanting to find the loophole that would prove this was all too good to be true. Finally, he looked up. "This is legally binding?" "Every word." "And you're willing to accept community oversight on implementation?" "I'm willing to have Lena Brooks act as community liaison throughout construction. She answers to the community board, not to me. If we violate terms, she reports it directly to you." Everyone turned to look at Lena. She definitely hadn't agreed to this role, but Adrian's expression told her to trust him. "I'd need actual authority," Lena said slowly. "Power to halt construction if community benefits aren't being implemented properly. You'd have it, written into your contract, and I'd need regular access to financial records, full transparency. Done. And Cole Enterprises would need to fund a community oversight position, someone local who actually lives in the neighborhood and can monitor day-to-day impact." Adrian didn't even hesitate. "Agreed. Who did you have in mind?" Lena looked at the crowd, searching. Found who she was looking for. "Mrs. Chen, you've lived here for 30 years. You know this neighborhood better than anyone. Would you be willing to oversee this development on behalf of the community?" Mrs. Chen looked shocked. "Me? I'm not a lawyer or a businesswoman. You're someone who cares about this place, someone people trust. That's worth more than any degree." Lena looked at Adrian. "Paid position, 40 hours a week, real salary, not volunteer work. 60,000 annually," Adrian said immediately. "With benefits." The crowd erupted in noise, people talking over each other, asking questions, arguing about whether this was real or just an elaborate manipulation. Councilman Rodriguez was conferring with the other board members, their expressions unreadable. Lena's hands were shaking. Everything they'd worked for came down to this moment. Either the board would approve and they'd actually get to build something meaningful, or they'd reject it and prove that even good faith development was impossible. Rodriguez stepped back to the microphone. The crowd quieted. "The community board will need 2 weeks to review all documentation and consult with legal counsel. But I'll say this now." He looked directly at Adrian. "This is the most comprehensive community benefits package I've seen in 15 years of public service. If it's genuine, if you actually follow through, this could be a model for ethical development citywide." "And if we don't follow through?" Adrian asked. "Then I'll personally make sure you never build anything in New York again." Rodriguez didn't smile. "The board will vote in 2 weeks. We'll be watching everything you do until then." The crowd started dispersing slowly, some people still skeptical, others cautiously hopeful. Mrs. Chen approached Adrian and Lena, looking overwhelmed. "Did you mean it? About the job?" "Every word," Adrian said. Someone from my office will contact you this week with a formal offer. You'll have final say on what happens to that rooftop garden. And if you see us cutting corners on community benefits, you have the authority and the salary to call us out publicly. Mrs. Chen's eyes were wet. My husband worked in construction for 40 years. Always said developers were liars who took everything and gave nothing back. I wish he was alive to see this. She walked away before either of them could respond. Lena and Adrian stood on the steps as the last of the protesters dispersed, surrounded by equipment that needed to be packed up and a presentation that had gone completely different from planned. That was insane, Lena said. That was necessary. You added a rent stabilization program overnight. That's going to cost millions. $8 million over 10 years, yes. Still profitable overall, just less obscenely profitable. Adrian started gathering architectural models. Worth it if it actually works. When did you decide to offer me the community liaison role? About 30 seconds before I said it. You looked like you were about to murder Rodriguez for asking the smart question, and I figured giving you official power to hold me accountable might help. You gave me authority to halt your own construction project. I gave you authority to make sure we don't accidentally become the thing we're trying not to be. He looked at her directly. I trust you. That's not something I say often. Lena felt the weight of that trust settle onto her shoulders. What if I screw this up? Then we screw it up together and try to fix it. Welcome to caring about outcomes. It's terrifying and you'll hate it. I already hate it. Good. That means you're doing it right. They packed up the equipment in silence, loading everything into the building while security guards kept watch. Jennifer appeared with updates. The community board had scheduled a full review hearing in 12 days. Local news outlets were requesting interviews. 3 other community organizations wanted to meet with Adrian to discuss similar development models for their neighborhoods. Tell the news outlets I'll give one interview, to whoever Mrs. Chen trusts to tell the story fairly, Adrian said, and set up meetings with the other community organizations. If this model works, other neighborhoods should have access to it. After Jennifer left, Lena sank into a conference room chair, exhausted in a way that went beyond physical tiredness. I can't believe we just did that. We had to. Hiding behind conference room walls would have proven we don't actually believe in community engagement. Adrian sat across from her. You were incredible, by the way. The part where you admitted you didn't trust me either. That's what made them listen. I was just being honest. Exactly. Honesty is rare in development presentations. Most architects sell dreams they know won't happen. You sold truth, even when the truth was uncomfortable. Lena's phone buzzed. Rachel, texting frantically. Are you insane? I just saw a video of you presenting to an angry mob outside your boss's building. It seemed like a good idea at the time. You're falling for him. Please tell me you know how dangerous that is. I know, and I'm doing it anyway. She put her phone away and found Adrian watching her. Rachel, he guessed, telling me I'm making terrible life choices. Are you? Probably, but they're my choices. Adrian stood, moving to the window. The protest crowd was completely gone now, the street back to normal Manhattan chaos. Traffic, pedestrians, delivery trucks, life continuing like nothing significant had happened. I need to tell you something, he said quietly. Before this goes any further, Lena felt her stomach clench. Okay, I'm broken. Not in a romantic, fixable way. In a real way that means I'll probably always work too much and struggle to be emotionally available and have days where grief hits so hard I can barely function. He didn't look at her. Sophie deserves better. You deserve better. But I don't know how to be better yet. I'm broken too, Lena said. I use work to avoid dealing with anything real. I trust people about as far as I can throw them. I grew up so poor that even now, with a good job and a decent apartment, I'm terrified everything will disappear. She stood, walking to stand beside him. We're both disasters. But maybe we can be disasters together. That's not a love story. That's a support group. Maybe love stories are just support groups with better marketing. Adrian almost smiled. Emma would have liked that line. You talk about her a lot. Is that weird? Me being interested in you while still being in love with my dead wife? Honestly, I don't know. This whole situation is so far outside anything I understand that I don't have a framework for what's weird and what's not. I'm never going to stop loving Emma. She's Sophie's mother. She was my partner for 8 years. That doesn't go away just because I'm starting to feel things for you. I'm not asking you to stop loving her. I'm just asking you to make room for something new alongside it. Lena turned to face him fully. Can you do that? Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached out, taking her hand. His fingers were warm, calloused from work despite the expensive suits. I don't know, but I want to try. They stood there holding hands like teenagers, looking out at Manhattan spreading beneath them, both terrified of what they were starting but too stubborn to walk away from it. Lena's phone buzzed again. This time it was Jennifer. Mr. Cole's 4 p.m. meeting is here. Should I reschedule? Adrian checked his own phone, sighing. I have 7 meetings this afternoon, all important, all scheduled weeks ago. And I have integration designs to finalize before the board review. So we go back to work. Yeah. Neither of them moved. This is the part where we're supposed to be professional and responsible, Adrian said. I know. And instead I'm trying to figure out if it would be completely inappropriate to kiss you in my own conference room. Lena's heart stopped. Probably. Given the whole boss-employee power dynamic situation. Right. Inappropriate. Definitely. So we should definitely not do that. Absolutely not. Adrian pulled her closer, and Lena stopped breathing. Just so we're clear, he said quietly. When this project is done, when Brooklyn Commons is approved, and you're no longer directly under my authority, I'm going to kiss you properly, somewhere that isn't my office. Probably after a date where we talk about something other than affordable housing ratios. That's very presumptuous. What makes you think I'll say yes to a date? Because you're looking at me the same way I'm looking at you. Like we're both about to do something stupid and neither of us cares. I hate that you're right. You love that I'm right. Lena laughed, and the sound surprised her. Real laughter, not polite professional amusement. The kind that came from actual happiness. When was the last time she'd been happy? Adrian's phone buzzed again, then Lena's, the real world demanding their attention. We should go, Lena said. We should. But they stood there for another minute, holding hands, stealing time they didn't have, both of them terrible at being practical when it actually mattered. Finally, Adrian let go, stepped back, returned to being the composed billionaire CEO everyone expected him to be. I'll see you tomorrow. 8 a.m. planning meeting. I'll be there. Lena? She turned back. Thank you, Adrian said, for caring enough to make this work, for trusting me when you had every reason not to, for being stubborn and difficult and perfect. I'm not perfect. I know. That's the perfect part. He left before she could respond, and Lena stood alone in the conference room trying to process what her life had become in the span of 3 weeks. She'd gone from hating Adrian Cole to helping him build something meaningful to falling for him despite every logical reason not to. And the scariest part was she didn't want to stop. That night, Lena worked late finishing the integration designs. Not because she had to, but because she wanted them to be perfect. Wanted every detail to prove that development didn't have to destroy communities. That profit and compassion weren't mutually exclusive. Around midnight, she got a text from an unknown number. Sophie wants to know if you like pizza. She's demanding we invite you to Friday dinner. This is Adrian. I gave her my phone unsupervised for 30 seconds, and now I'm apparently hosting pizza night. Lena smiled at her screen. I love pizza. Tell Sophie I'm in. She says you have to promise to talk about princesses and not boring work stuff. Deal fair warning, Margaret will be there. Emma's mother. She'll probably interrogate you about your intentions. My intentions are to eat pizza and discuss princesses. I think I can defend that. You're braver than I am. Lena fell asleep that night, still smiling, her laptop open to affordable housing specifications that were actually going to help real people, her phone showing texts from a man who was letting her into his daughter's life despite the risk. It was terrifying and complicated and nothing like she'd planned. And for the first time in years, Lena felt like she was building something that mattered. Not just a development, a life. The 2 weeks before the community board vote moved both too fast and impossibly slow. Days blurred together in meetings, revisions, and presentations to skeptical stakeholders who all wanted proof that Brooklyn Commons wouldn't just become another broken promise. Nights stretched long with Lena and Adrian working side by side, refining details, strengthening protections, building something neither of them had thought possible when they'd argued about financially impossible parks at 30,000 feet. Friday came faster than Lena expected. She showed up at Adrian's brownstone at 6 p.m. carrying wine she'd agonized over in the store for 20 minutes, trying to find something that said, "I'm dating your son-in-law, but I'm not trying too hard," which was apparently not a category wine stores organized by. Sophie answered the door wearing a tiara and a shirt covered in pizza sauce. "You came! Daddy said you might be too busy with boring work stuff, but I told him you promised, and promises are important." She grabbed Lena's hand, dragging her inside. "Grandma's in the kitchen being worried about everything. Come meet her properly." Margaret stood at the stove making something that smelled incredible, her posture rigid in a way that suggested she'd heard Sophie's announcement and was preparing for battle. "Mrs. Chen," Lena said, trying for respectful but not obsequious. "It's Margaret. Mrs. Chen makes me sound ancient." She turned, wiping her hands on a towel, studying Lena with the same evaluating intensity her daughter had probably possessed. "Sophie tells me you're Daddy's special friend. Her words, not mine." "Grandma, you're supposed to be nice. Daddy said so." "I'm being perfectly nice. I'm just trying to understand what Miss Brooks' intentions are toward my son-in-law." "My intentions are to eat pizza and discuss princesses," Lena said, echoing what she'd texted Adrian. "Everything else is still being figured out." Something that might have been approval flickered across Margaret's face. "At least you're honest." Adrian's last girlfriend lied about wanting to be part of Sophie's life, then disappeared the moment parenting got inconvenient. There was another girlfriend? Lena hadn't known that. Brief. About a year ago. Disaster from start to finish. Margaret returned to the stove. "Sophie, go tell your father his guest is here and he needs to stop hiding in his office." Sophie ran off, leaving Lena alone with Margaret and the distinct feeling she was being assessed for weaknesses. "Adrian doesn't let people in easily," Margaret said without looking up from whatever she was stirring. "After Emma died, he became someone I barely recognized. Cold, distant, obsessed with work. I blamed him for a long time. Still do, some days. But I've watched him these past few weeks, and he's different. More present. Almost like the man my daughter fell in love with. I don't think I can take credit for that." "I'm not giving you credit, I'm warning you." Now Margaret did turn to face her. "If you're playing games with him, if this is some office romance that you'll walk away from when it gets complicated, you'll break him worse than grief did, and you'll hurt Sophie in the process. That I won't forgive." The words were delivered calmly, but the threat underneath was very real. "I'm not playing games," Lena said quietly. "I'm terrified of this. Of him. Of how fast it's happening, and how much it already matters. But I'm not going to walk away just because it's scary." "Why not?" "Most people would." "Because I spent my whole life being practical, choosing safe options that wouldn't hurt, and all it got me was loneliness and work I didn't care about until I met someone who made me remember why any of this mattered in the first place." Lena met Margaret's eyes directly. "I'm not here to replace Emma. That's impossible, and I wouldn't try. But I'm here because Adrian and Sophie both make me want to try being someone better than the person I've been." Margaret studied her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled. Small, sad, but real. "Emma would have liked you. She had no patience for people who played it safe." She pulled plates from the cabinet. "Set the table. Adrian's probably panicking in his office about whether this dinner was a terrible idea." Lena found Adrian exactly where Margaret predicted, sitting at his desk staring at his laptop without actually seeing it. He looked up when she knocked, relief flooding his face. "You're here? I thought you might bail." Sophie made me promise. Apparently promises are important. "She's been talking about this dinner all week. Drew you a picture of us eating pizza together. It's on the fridge." He stood, running a hand through his hair in a gesture Lena was starting to recognize as nervousness. "Fair warning, Margaret's going to interrogate you. She already threatened me about not screwing this up." "She threatened me too. I think we both passed." "How do you know?" "She told me to set the table." "That feels like acceptance." They ate pizza in the dining room, Sophie dominating the conversation with detailed explanations of princess hierarchies and why Moana was technically the best princess because she didn't need a prince to save her. Margaret watched the interaction with careful attention, but her hostility had softened into something more like cautious observation. Adrian was different here, more relaxed. He listened to Sophie's stories with genuine attention, made jokes that actually landed, laughed in a way Lena had only seen glimpses of at work. This was who he'd been before grief had rebuilt him into something harder. After dinner, Sophie demanded that Lena help her build a blanket fort in the living room, which somehow turned into all four of them crammed into a structure that was architecturally unsound and extremely cozy. Sophie fell asleep between Adrian and Lena, her head on her father's shoulder, one hand holding Lena's. "She doesn't usually warm up to people this fast," Margaret said quietly from her corner of the fort. "She's been cautious since Emma died. Afraid people will leave." "I'm not leaving," Lena said, then realized how presumptuous that sounded. "I mean, I know what you mean." Adrian's voice was soft, careful not to wake Sophie. "And I'm holding you to it." Margaret looked between them, then carefully extracted herself from the fort. "I'm going to clean up the kitchen. You two figure out how to get my granddaughter to bed without waking her." After Margaret left, Adrian and Lena sat in the blanket fort silence, Sophie sleeping peacefully between them. "This is the most domestic thing I've done in 4 years," Adrian said. "Building blanket forts?" "Being happy. Actually, genuinely happy instead of just functional." He looked at Lena over Sophie's sleeping form. "I forgot what this felt like." "What does it feel like?" "Terrifying, like I'm tempting fate by admitting I want something beyond just surviving." His hand found Lena's across Sophie's small body. "But I'm tired of just surviving." They stayed in the fort until Sophie started to stir. Then Adrian carried her upstairs to bed while Lena helped Margaret finish cleaning the kitchen. They worked in comfortable silence until Margaret spoke. "I was wrong about you." Lena looked up from the dish she was drying. "What?" "At the birthday party, I thought you were just another business relationship Adrian was pretending mattered. But you actually care about Sophie. About him, I can see it." Margaret dried her hands, turning to face Lena properly. "Emma used to say that love wasn't about finding someone perfect. It was about finding someone who made you want to be better, even when being better was hard. You make Adrian want to be better. That's not nothing. He makes me want to be better too." "Good. Because Sophie needs people in her life who are trying. She's had enough of people who've given up." Margaret pulled Lena into an unexpected hug. "Welcome to the family. Unofficial, complicated, disaster version of family, but family nonetheless." When Adrian came back downstairs, Lena was saying goodbye to Margaret at the door, both of them looking surprised by their own friendliness. "She likes you," Adrian said after Margaret left. "That's unprecedented. She threatened to destroy me if I hurt you or Sophie. That's how she shows affection." They stood in his entryway, suddenly alone for the first time all evening, the weight of everything unspoken hanging between them. "I should go," Lena said, not moving. "You should. Big week ahead. Community board vote on Wednesday. We both need sleep." "Absolutely." Neither of them moved toward the door. "Adrian, I know this is supposed to wait until the project is approved and you're not technically my employee anymore and we figured out all the professional ethics complications," Adrian said. "But I've spent 4 years being practical and careful, and it didn't make me any less broken." He stepped closer, and Lena's heart forgot how to work properly. "So I'm going to be impractical, just this once." When he kissed her, it felt like falling and landing at the same time, gentle, careful, like he was afraid she might break or disappear. Lena kissed him back, her hands finding his shoulders, steadying herself against the overwhelming feeling of finally, something that made sense. They broke apart slowly, both breathing hard. "That was," Lena started, "completely inappropriate given the professional power dynamics, yes. I was going to say perfect." Adrian laughed, real and surprised. "Stay, please, just for a while longer. We can watch terrible TV and pretend we're normal people having a normal relationship." So Lena stayed. They watched a documentary about architecture that Adrian kept pausing to argue with, both of them curled on his couch, like they'd been doing this for years instead of weeks. Somewhere around midnight, Lena fell asleep on his shoulder, and Adrian let her, his arm wrapped around her like a promise. She woke up around 3 a.m. to find a blanket draped over her and Adrian asleep in the chair across from the couch, laptop open on his lap, clearly having tried to let her rest while he worked. So typically him, it hurt. Lena stood, gently removing the laptop, covering him with the blanket he'd probably meant for himself. She left a note on the coffee table. "Thank you for pizza and blanket forts and being impractical." See you Monday. L. The next few days were a controlled chaos of final preparations. Mrs. Chen officially accepted the oversight position and immediately started asking hard questions about construction timelines and contractor accountability. Local news ran a surprisingly fair piece about the development, interviewing community members who ranged from cautiously optimistic to still deeply skeptical. 3 city council members expressed public support. 2 others condemned it as gentrification with better PR. Tuesday night, the night before the vote, Lena couldn't sleep. She gave up around 2 a.m. and went to the office, finding Adrian already there, making revisions to presentations that were already perfect. "You need to sleep," Lena said from his doorway. "So do you." "I tried. My brain won't stop running worst-case scenarios." "Same." He pushed away from his desk. "Want to run worst-case scenarios together? Misery loves company." They ended up on the roof of Coal Enterprises headquarters, looking out at the city that would decide tomorrow whether they'd built something worth approving. The night was cold, early autumn starting to bite. Adrian gave Lena his jacket without being asked, the same way he'd given her his coat on the airplane, and Lena wondered if he even realized he did it. "What if they vote no?" Lena asked quietly. "Then we've wasted months of work and proven that even good faith development can't overcome community distrust." Adrian leaned against the rooftop railing. "And I'll have failed the first project I actually cared about in 4 years." "What if they vote yes, but we can't deliver? What if the economics don't work, or contractors cut corners, or we accidentally become the thing we promised we wouldn't be? Then we fail publicly and spectacularly, and I'll have proven Margaret right about being the person who destroys everything he touches." They stood in silence for a moment, both of them staring at their worst fears. "We're really good at catastrophizing," Lena said eventually. "Years of practice. Anxiety is basically our superpower at this point." "Very marketable skill. Absolutely useless, but we've perfected it." Lena laughed despite the nerves eating her alive. "What if it works, though? What if the board approves and we actually build something that helps people and doesn't destroy the neighborhood? Then we'll have proven that caring about outcomes isn't financially impossible, just really difficult and expensive." Adrian turned to look at her directly. "And we'll have to figure out what we are when we're not united by a project." "Is that what we've been? United by a project?" "No. But the project gave me an excuse to spend time with you without admitting I was falling for someone when I didn't think I was capable of that anymore." Lena's heart did complicated things. "When did you know that you were falling?" "Probably when you yelled at me on the airplane about my moral high ground built from other people's suffering. You were furious and righteous, and completely unimpressed by money or power. I'd forgotten people like you existed." He smiled slightly. "When did you know?" "When you kept Mrs. Chen's garden. You could have bulldozed it without anyone stopping you. But you didn't, because it mattered to her. And somewhere under all your spreadsheets and profit margins, things that matter to people still matter to you." "I'm still the person who's replacing Oakland Park with luxury development." "I know. But you're also the person spending $8 million on rent stabilization and giving me authority to halt your own construction and hiring a 70-year-old woman to hold you accountable because it's the right thing to do." Lena moved closer. "You're complicated. I'm okay with complicated. What if I'm always going to work too much and struggle with emotional availability and have days where I can barely function because grief hits without warning? Then I'll be there on those days, and you can be there on my days when poverty trauma makes me panic about money or when I self-sabotage because I don't think I deserve good things." She took his hand. "We don't have to be perfect. We just have to be honest." Adrian pulled her closer, and they stood on the roof watching the city wake up, both of them exhausted and terrified and more hopeful than they'd been in years. The community board meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. Wednesday. By 6:30, the venue was packed. Community members, reporters, city officials, protesters both for and against the development. Mrs. Chen sat in the front row wearing a name tag that said Community Oversight Coordinator and looking determined. Margaret had brought Sophie, which surprised everyone, including Adrian. Rachel had come to support Lena, sitting beside Mrs. Chen and looking ready to fight anyone who said something mean. Lena and Adrian presented together, tag-teaming the complicated sections, supporting each other through hostile questions. They'd rehearsed it a dozen times, but nothing prepared them for the reality of defending their work to a room full of people whose lives would be changed by the outcome. Councilman Rodriguez asked the hardest questions, pushing on enforcement mechanisms and long-term sustainability. Mrs. Chen spoke during public comment, lending credibility they desperately needed. A young mother talked about needing the grocery store more than the park. A teenager argued that parks mattered more than luxury apartments. Everyone had valid points. Everyone was right about something and wrong about something else. That was the terrible truth about development. There were no perfect solutions, just difficult trade-offs where you hoped you'd prioritize the right things. The board deliberated for 90 minutes. Lena sat with Adrian in the hallway outside, both of them too nervous to talk. Sophie had fallen asleep on Margaret's lap. Rachel kept texting Lena encouragement that mostly consisted of increasingly creative threats against board members if they voted wrong. Finally, they were called back in. Councilman Rodriguez stood at the podium, his expression unreadable. The community board has reviewed Brooklyn Commons in unprecedented detail. We've consulted legal experts, financial analysts, community advocates, and our own conscience. He paused, and Lena stopped breathing. This development represents either a new model for ethical urban growth or an elaborate justification for gentrification. We won't know which until it's built and operating, but the community benefits package is comprehensive enough, and the enforcement mechanism strong enough, that we're willing to take the risk. Lena's vision went blurry. The board votes 7-1 in favor of approval, with conditions. Mrs. Chen will report quarterly to this board on implementation. Ms. Brooks' authority to halt construction for benefit violations is confirmed and expanded. Cole Enterprises will post a $10 million community benefits bond, forfeitable if contractual obligations aren't met. Rodriguez looked directly at Adrian. You've made substantial promises tonight, Mr. Cole. We're trusting you to keep them. Don't make us regret it. The room erupted. Cheering from supporters, angry shouting from opponents, reporters surging forward with questions. Lena felt Adrian's hand find hers under the table, squeezing tight. They'd won. They'd actually won. The next few hours were chaos. Interviews, congratulations, Margaret hugging them both while Sophie slept through the entire celebration. Mrs. Chen crying happy tears about her garden. Rachel threatening to kill Lena for not telling her how serious things were with Adrian, then immediately demanding details. It was after midnight when Lena and Adrian finally escaped, finding themselves back on the steps of Cole Enterprises headquarters, where they'd presented to an angry crowd 2 weeks ago. We did it, Lena said, still not quite believing it. We did. Now we just have to actually build it without screwing up. No pressure. Absolutely none. Just $40 million and an entire neighborhood's future depending on us not failing. They stood in comfortable silence, watching late-night traffic navigate Manhattan streets. The project's approved, Adrian said eventually, which means professionally, you're no longer under my direct authority. The ethics complications have been resolved. Is that your way of asking me on a proper date? That's my way of saying I'm terrified of asking you on a proper date, because what if I'm terrible at it, and you realize I'm actually boring when we're not arguing about affordable housing? Adrian, I've eaten pizza in a blanket fort with your daughter and been interrogated by your mother-in-law and spent 3 weeks working until 3 a.m. on spreadsheets together. I know exactly how boring you are. I'm still here. That's probably the least romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. You want romance? Fine. Adrian Cole, you're brilliant and stubborn and broken in ways that match how I'm broken, and you make me want to build things that matter instead of just surviving. You're a terrible workaholic with emotional availability issues and a 7-year-old daughter who deserves better than another person who'll disappoint her. I'm probably going to disappoint her anyway because I don't know how to be someone's stepmother or partner or anything beyond a disaster who's good at her job. But I want to try. If you want to try with me. Adrian stared at her. That was either the worst or the best confession I've ever heard. It's honest. That's all I've got. Honest works. He pulled her closer, and Lena went willingly. Dinner. Tomorrow night. Somewhere that isn't my office or a construction site or anywhere we can talk about affordable housing ratios. What will we talk about instead? I have no idea. We'll figure it out. That's a terrible plan. All my best plans are terrible. You should know that by now. Lena kissed him, right there on the steps of Cole Enterprises headquarters, not caring who saw or what it meant professionally. When they broke apart, both of them were smiling. "I'm still scared," Lena admitted. "Me too, but I think being scared means it matters." Very philosophical for midnight. "I'm delirious from exhaustion and relief. Philosophy happens." They went their separate ways that night, but texted until 3 a.m. anyway, neither of them able to sleep. The next morning, construction permits were filed. Mrs. Chen started her new job demanding accountability from contractors before ground had even been broken. Margaret called Adrian to tell him she approved of Lena, but he was still on probation for being an emotionally unavailable workaholic. Life didn't magically improve. Adrian still worked too much. Lena still struggled with trusting good things. They argued about project details and personal boundaries, and whether Sophie was ready to know they were dating or if it was too soon. Margaret had opinions about everything. Rachel had more opinions. Sophie just wanted Lena to come to more Friday dinners and help build better blanket forts. But 6 months later, when Brooklyn Commons broke ground with Mrs. Chen ceremonially turning the first shovel of dirt, Lena stood beside Adrian and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not naive hope that everything would work perfectly. Real hope. The kind that acknowledged difficulty but believed in trying anyway. The construction took 18 months. There were problems. Contractors who cut corners until Mrs. Chen caught them, and Lena halted work. Budget overruns that Adrian absorbed rather than cut community benefits. Protests from people who would never trust development regardless of promises made. Moments where both Lena and Adrian wondered if they'd taken on something impossible. But there were victories too. The grocery store opened early, serving families 6 months before the apartments were ready. Local hiring exceeded projections. Displaced residents returned to affordable units that were actually affordable, not luxury apartments marketed as accessible. Mrs. Chen's rooftop garden became a neighborhood gathering place before construction even finished. Sophie turned 8, then 9. Started calling Lena her almost stepmom, which led to conversations about what that meant and whether Lena was ready for it. Margaret became someone Lena called for advice, then someone she called just to talk. Rachel became friends with Mrs. Chen, bonding over their shared commitment to holding powerful people accountable. 2 years after that first airplane argument, Lena and Adrian stood on the completed rooftop of Brooklyn Commons, watching the sun set over a neighborhood that hadn't been destroyed. Changed, yes. Different, absolutely. But not destroyed. The luxury apartments were full. So were the affordable units. The grocery store served 3,000 families. The community center hosted after-school programs and job training. Mrs. Chen's garden grew vegetables that fed half the block. Small businesses within the 5-block radius had survived, protected by rent stabilization that Adrian had fought his own board to maintain. It wasn't perfect. Rents had still increased in surrounding areas. Some families had still been displaced despite their best efforts. The neighborhood had changed in ways that made old residents uncomfortable and new residents defensive. But it was better than it would have been, better than Oakland Park dying slowly from neglect, better than luxury development without any community protection, better than the alternatives. Emma would be proud of this, Lena said quietly. Adrian's hand found hers. He did that automatically now, reaching for her in moments of significance. She would be proud of you, the way you fought to make this actually mean something. We fought together. You fought first. I just learned to follow your lead. Sophie appeared on the rooftop, now 9 years old and confident in a way that made both Adrian and Margaret emotional. Are you guys being romantic again? Grandma says you're always romantic when you think no one's watching. Grandma talks too much, Adrian said. Grandma says you need to marry Lena already because she's tired of you being scared of commitment. Lena choked on air. Adrian looked mortified. Sophie, we've talked about this. I know. Adult relationships are complicated, and we should let you figure it out at your own pace. Sophie rolled her eyes with impressive 9-year-old disdain. But you love her and she loves you, and you're both here anyway, so I don't understand what you're waiting for. She ran off before either of them could respond, leaving them alone on the rooftop with a question hanging in the air. She's not wrong, Lena said eventually. About which part? All of it. We love each other. We're already here. We've built a life together. She turned to face him directly. What are we waiting for? Adrian was quiet for a long moment, his gray eyes reflecting the city lights starting to glow in the dusk. I'm waiting to be sure I won't fail you the way I failed Emma, that I won't choose work over being present, that I won't wake up one day and realize I've turned back into the cold machine that was easier than feeling. Adrian, you're never going to be sure. Neither am I. We're both disasters who work too much and struggle with being emotionally available and will probably screw this up in spectacular ways. Lena took both his hands. But we're disasters together. That has to count for something. It counts for everything. He pulled something from his pocket, a small box. I've been carrying this for 3 months, waiting for the right moment. But I'm starting to think the right moment is just any moment when we're honest about what we want. The ring was simple, elegant, exactly what Lena would have chosen if she'd ever let herself imagine this moment. I'm still broken, Adrian said. Still grieving Emma some days. Still terrible at work-life balance. Still figuring out how to be the father Sophie deserves. He met her eyes. But you make me want to keep trying. To be better. To build things that matter beyond profit margins. You make me want to be fully alive instead of just functional. Is this a proposal or a therapy session? Can it be both? Lena laughed, tears running down her face. Yes. Whatever you're asking, yes. I haven't actually asked yet. Then ask already before I pass out from emotional overload. Adrian dropped to one knee on the rooftop of the building they'd built together, the city spreading out beneath them, all of Brooklyn watching whether they knew it or not. Lena Brooks, will you marry me and keep holding me accountable and continue being the most stubborn, brilliant, difficult person I've ever met? That's a terrible proposal. It's honest. Fair point. Yes. Absolutely yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger and they kissed on the rooftop where everything had changed, both of them crying and laughing and completely overwhelmed. Sophie's voice drifted up from somewhere below. Grandma, they're being romantic again. I think he finally did it. Margaret's response was too distant to hear, but the tone was clearly approving. 3 months later, they got married in a small ceremony at Brooklyn Commons, in the community plaza that incorporated elements from Lena's original park design. Mrs. Chen's garden provided flowers. Sophie served as flower girl and best person simultaneously, a role she'd invented because traditional weddings were boring and needed improvement. Margaret cried the entire time. Rachel gave a speech about how she'd known from the beginning that Lena was terrible at not falling for complicated men. The neighborhood attended. Families who'd fought against the development, families who'd supported it, contractors who'd built it, city officials who'd approved it, everyone who'd been part of making Brooklyn Commons into something that actually worked. It wasn't perfect. The neighborhood was still changing in ways that made people uncomfortable. Gentrification was still happening despite their best efforts. The tension between Old Brooklyn and New Brooklyn would probably never fully resolve. But that evening, eating cheap catered food in a plaza they'd fought to make meaningful, surrounded by people whose lives had been changed by their stubborn refusal to accept that caring was financially impossible, Lena understood something important. Love wasn't about finding perfect people or perfect solutions. It was about finding people worth fighting alongside, worth building with. Worth being honest with even when honesty was uncomfortable. Adrian had been right that first night on the airplane. Heart did lose to capital most of the time. But sometimes, if you were stubborn enough and cared enough and found people who refused to give up even when giving up was practical, you could make capital work for heart instead of against it. That was worth celebrating. Years later, when Sophie was in college studying architecture and urban planning, when Brooklyn Commons had become a case study in ethical development taught in universities, when Adrian and Lena had built 3 more similar projects in other neighborhoods, they would still tell the story of how they met. On an airplane, arguing about financially impossible parks, 2 broken people who'd turned themselves into machines to survive pain, who'd found each other at exactly the wrong moment and decided to try anyway. The story always ended the same way, with Lena's observation that Adrian had given her his coat when she was cold, even though kindness was supposed to be impractical. And Adrian's response that sometimes the most practical thing you could do was care about someone. That love wasn't weakness or waste. It was the thing that made building anything worthwhile. Sophie would roll her eyes at the romance of it, the same way she'd rolled her eyes at 9 years old, telling them to stop being scared of commitment. But she'd also smile, because she'd grown up watching 2 people prove that broken things could be repaired, that caring wasn't financially impossible, that the best things in life came from being impractical enough to try. And in a world that constantly tried to reduce everything to profit margins and cold calculations, that lesson was worth more than any empire. It was worth everything.